Okay, well, my atomic Mac clock here says 8 o'clock, so we'll call the meeting to order. Peter, roll call.
Sure. Rickard? Here. Epstein?
Here.
Smith?
Here.
Dornbrook here, and O'Grady?
Here.
Eric, any announcements to make?
Just the usual announcement. I'd like to welcome everybody to Kirkwood Meadows Public Utility District regular meeting. It's nice to see a sizable crowd, although my staff still outnumbers the visitors. The meeting is being live fed over the internet and can be seen at www.kmpud.com. If you public would like to submit any questions via the internet, they can do so by sending it to E. Christison, that's E. Christ E. Son, at kmpud.com.
Thank you. We'll move on to comments from the audience. Nancy?
Nancy Trevette, Westside homeowner. At the beginning of the winter season, I recall this board making some kind of comment regarding Loop Road, that you had a trick up your sleeve to make compliance happen, or, fixing it by the time Tier 4 opened. Well, here we are at the end, and whatever the trick was, it doesn't seem to have worked. So I'm hoping you've come up with another trick. A better trick, right. That's it. Have another comment. Yesterday down on Yarrow, I heard this noise in the sky, and I thought, gee, what is that? It doesn't sound like somebody cutting wood. Wonder what it is. Well, I finally figured it out. It was a drone. And so I know this afternoon, we're going to have a discussion about it at our Q&A meeting. But it's just, I think as a district, maybe you need to start thinking about that. What does that mean? I've had people say to me, oh yeah, I've had a drone come by my window and look in. So I don't know whether there's any kind of regulations that the district could come up with, or guidance, or something like that.
Yeah, I got buzzed. We're just doing a little fly fishing out here this past summer. Got buzzed by a drone.
You didn't hook it with your back cast?
I tried, but I'm just not that good.
Thank you, Nancy. Any other comments? Yes.
Well, I just want to say a brief word, members of the board, Eric. I see today that on the agenda that before you is the consent for RCI's approval of RCI's district engineer contract. And I just wanted to come here on behalf of RCI to personally thank you for renewing our contract and giving us the opportunity to continue to provide services in this capacity. And to assure you that despite some of our personnel changes in the past few months, that the core RCI team still is here. We've been here working with you since 2009, and we are excited and ready to continue to provide the engineering needs to the district. Joe Cassiopo, who is one of RCI's senior engineers, he's our principal. He's been part of RCI for over 20 years and a California PE for over 25 years. He will be taking on the lead role as district engineer. He couldn't be here today. He's on spring break with his family, and but would love to come up and introduce himself to the board at a later date if that sounds useful to the board. We can have him do that. And just as with Michelle, Joe will be fully supported by RCI's multidisciplinary staff, including myself, who has worked with the board since 2009 on the power line project and continues to assist Eric with the special use permit with the Forest Service and getting the operations plans in place for the year. This is Kristen Roldson. She works with the district staff on the quarterly reporting, waste discharge quarterly reporting and annual reports. As you probably are aware, RCI has geologists and stormwater specialists and survey crews and testing materials, labs and specialists in-house as well. And we are here and excited to be able to continue working with you, and I wanted to express that and assure you that that we are confident in our continued ability to provide and exceed the district's needs, and we want to make sure you are confident too. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Joe?
I'm Joanne Michael, by
Right.
the way.
That's what I wanted to know.
Already led with that. Joanne Michael.
I was sitting here remembering the face. I got the first name, but not the
I
last.
know it's been a while, obviously, but yeah, I just want to help facilitate that transition and make sure that it's any changes are as seamless as possible.
Thank you.
And I will get Joe up here if you guys, maybe at the next board meeting, if you guys want to put a face to the name and ask him any questions.
Yeah, I think that'd be great to.
Okay.
be able to-
Excellent, we'll do that.
Thank you. Any other comments? With none, we'll move on to agenda item 5, corrections to the agenda or consent calendar.
I'd actually like to pull from the consent calendar the IT committee charter and the personnel committee charter. I just have a comment on each.
Okay. And that's from item D, right? And that's 6D?
Yes.
Okay. Any other changes, corrections? Then we'll move on to number 6, adoption of the consent calendar. And this would be A, approve the regular board meeting minutes, February 3rd, 2018. Approve the special board meeting minutes of March 5th, 2018. Approve the current consent for claims. We will, I can't recall if that was everything in the, under the charters there. I think there are other charters, so it'd just be,
Planning committee charter.
yeah, it'd just be removing the IT and personnel charters from item D. Item E, approve RCI district engineer contract. F, review receivable shut-offs report. And G, approve a thank you letter to former district engineer Michelle Gamble. So with that, do I hear a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I move we adopt the consent calendar.
I'll second that.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So be it. Then we'll move forward with the 2 items that we removed from the consent calendar, the IT and Personnel Committee charters.
Okay, and the IT one, what has actually happened, and it's not listed here, but I think it's really important, and some wording, something like, this would be under the responsibilities. Review methods for data collection that can improve the district services performance. I mean, something like the whole GPS thing on this snow removal vehicles, for example, those kinds of things, that kind of thing isn't listed, and I just thought it should be noted, since I think it's a pretty important part of that charter. So that,
So just, I'm capturing it right now.
well,
Removed,
yeah, you can,
Improved methods of data collection.
I think data collection and analysis to make
yeah.
sure we have the information we need to.
So basically, what I had was review methods for data collection and analysis that can improve the district's services and performance.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Got it.
And under personnel one, this is something that Peter has said many times over the years that I've been on the board, and that is that it's important for staff to have someplace to go if they need to, if they have a concern about their relationship with the general manager, for example, or if there's been a disciplinary action and they have a place to appeal it. And is that right, Peter? I mean, I think that I've heard you say that a number of times. And I don't see that as part of the charter, basically, and I don't know exactly how to say that in a way that's appropriate, but basically, maybe just hear staff appeal, disciplinary action appeals, or something like that. I don't know how to word it properly.
Yeah, the only reason we don't put that in there, that is a confidential item, and this is a public meeting, so you can't discuss confidential items. So
okay,
in that case, Jeff would appoint a temporary advisory committee to hear confidential employment issues. That's why it wasn't included.
Okay.
But we can,
Okay.
I think
No,
we talked about putting in the employee handbook.
it is going in the revisions to the employee handbook, which will come back before personnel, but
Okay.
it's
okay, that's
just
fine.
because, is
That's
that
fine.
okay? All right.
Okay, good, thank you.
You're welcome. So leave that one as is?
Just, yeah, forget that.
Okay, any other comments on those?
So there's no benefit to putting in that charter that committee could appoint that?
Well, the committee doesn't appoint it, I would appoint it. The president would appoint.
Okay, got it.
Any other comments?
So with the correction to personnel which I've made, and IT as is, or IT I've made and personnel as is, does the board
Correct.
want to adopt those?
Correct. We would be adopting the two committee charters, the IT with the changes noted, and then the Personnel Committee charter as presented. Do I hear a motion to adopt? Okay, second? Second by Standish. All in favor?
Aye. Oh, that was a close call.
Okay, we'll move on to item 8, finances. Kelly.
That's why I tell our district engineer they have to sit through the whole meeting.
Yeah.
Okay. We will begin. The January financials were included just because we didn't get to go over them last month, but I'm going to start with February financials on page 67 of your packet with the consolidated balance sheet. The only note I've included on the balance sheet for February was in regard to the total operating cash and total cushion of credit, that those should be netted together so that we could actually see what our total operating cash is over plan, and the total with those netted together is $580,000. And then we should also note that our capital reserve is up from plan by $653,000. Other than that, nothing new to report on the balance sheet unless there are any questions.
It's at 1.213 million, right?
I'm sorry?
When you combine them, it's 1.213
Right.
million. That's great.
Okay, moving on then to the combined income statement on page 69. Total revenues year-to-date are up from plan by $156,000. And again, that does include our greenhouse gas auction proceeds of about $47,000.
Do we include those in the budget as routine, or we just consider it overachievement?
They are included in the budget.
Right.
They were included in the other non-operating revenue line. It was posted I posted the budget number in the wrong account. But
Okay.
we are over budget in other non-operating revenues as well, and that's due to the funds we received from FEMA and Cal OES. So that's why you don't see the difference there.
Okay.
But I did budget for those. I budgeted for $38,000, I believe, and we received $47,000 from
Right.
the auction proceeds, so still even over what we budgeted there.
Right.
Year-to-date, total operating is up from plan by $345,000, and that's due to the overage in revenues and savings in expenses. And again, if you look at the total other non-operating revenue at $295,000, that includes that the FEMA Cal OES funds that we've received so far through February. We'll move on.
Kelly, I'm sorry, do we still have more funds coming?
Actually, we
Remember?
did. We received $54,000 more than what we expected. We weren't expecting any more, but we did receive $54,000 in March. And Brandy was made aware recently that FEMA is looking to close out our large contracts or large claims that we have with them, which is going to result in some additional funding. We don't know exactly how much yet, but so we're still due to receive some more funds from FEMA and Cal OES. So
Very nice.
that's helping with our cash position. So
Great.
we'll move on.
Did you have a question, Nancy? Or?
Oh, no, no.
Oh,
it's
okay.
just
We'll move on to water on page 74. Year-to-date, total operating revenues from water are down from plan, but this is strictly due to the budgeting error that was made with the base rate revenue. You can see that base rates are under plan by $25,000, so had that budgeting error not occurred, water would actually be over plan. Year-to-date, total operating is, again, down from plan, but you can see if that $25,000 error wasn't in the budget, then water would actually be performing better than planned.
Kelly, can I ask a question about that?
Mm-hmm.
Can you remind me, is that simply a budgeting error, or did it actually affect the base rates?
No, it was just it was a budgeting error. It was, we budgeted for too many EDUs, or the multiplier on the
Right.
residential base rates.
Right.
We had gone back and forth about whether we were going to leave it at 1 or whether we were going to actually apply a multiplier to residential base rates. And when we were going back and forth, we left the multiplier in on one of the budgeting lines in the budget, and it was...
So the base rate, it wasn't a miscalculation of the base rate, it was simply...
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Moving on to wastewater. You'll notice operating revenues for wastewater are down from plan by about $16,000. And again, you can see that, base rate revenue error at $10,000. So most of that is due to that budgeting error. You will notice salaries and wages for February are significantly over plan, and this is just due to the issues that were happening in the wastewater department in the month of February. There was lots of extra staff helping out at the wastewater treatment plant in the month of February. Most of the repairs that happened were actually in-house repairs that the guys were able to complete. So that's one good thing there, but extra time was definitely spent at the wastewater treatment plant in the month of February. So year-to-date total operating is down from plan by $35,000. Considering all of the issues we had at the wastewater treatment plant and including the $25,000 repair that had to happen to the centrifuge, I think that number could be a lot worse. So even with all the issues, not as bad as it could be. Moving on to electric on page 77. Year-to-date total revenues are up by $151,000. You can see total operating expenses. We are better than planned by $109,000. So bringing year-to-date total operating up from plan by $261,000. And you can see again in that other non-operating revenue, $278,000, and most of that is from FEMA and Cal OES. So electric is having a pretty good year considering, and that's good to hear since there are things coming up that we will need cash for. Moving on to snow removal on page 79. I just wanted to make a note. You can see that year-to-date total operating for snow removal through February was better than planned by $119,000. A lot of this is going to go away in March. There was a significant amount of overtime spent in March with all the snow that we got. obviously with all that snow comes repairs and things like that. So, but it's so obvious how, our whole revenue stream is based on Mother Nature. So it's just a very clear representation of that you can see here in snow removal.
And one other item I would add to that is labor was managed pretty aggressively in terms of we didn't have snow, people taking time off without pay, and we never fully staffed our budgeted snow removal operators, so that also helped budget because we never had the snow to do it and we were able to manage through March. So that's another reason, the labor reduction.
When we discussed this item at the Finance Committee meeting, there was some comments from the HOAs that it'd be helpful to get the contracts sooner rather than later. Can we get them out at the May board meeting? Can we approve them at the May board meeting? Would that satisfy the HOA?
Yeah, Nancy had a good point at the finance meeting, and so I went back and looked at the history. So what I found was last April 17th, so almost a year ago, not quite, the former general manager had sent out a letter telling all the HOAs you're seeing a 5% increase. That had never gone through finance or the board at that point. So I didn't realize that, and so my apologies. I'd rather route it through finance and the board before I make that kind of decision. So I think we have an early finance meeting. We moved it up a week, so we'll have some better projection on that. As soon as I have the March actuals, because March is really the month we need to look at, I'm going to be able to analyze where we're at with the addition of the 950 GC, our new loader. That's going to be one component I have to look at that's important, and where we were at budgetarily with our March in there. So I hope maybe next week I'll be able to actually have real numbers and be able to get something. So worst case, at least a preliminary idea to the board. I don't, unless it's the board's direction, I don't feel comfortable arbitrarily deciding on a rate increase without going through finance and the board, as was done previously. So it's really a board discretion.
Is, including going through finance and the board, can we target getting these approved at the May board meeting?
I think that's reasonable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable.
Because it's a recurring point of pain, not just for
Sure.
KMA, but Jack Longanati raised it.
Yeah.
And we got to crunch the numbers either now or June, so we might as well do it now, since you no longer have any RUS applications to work on.
What Michael did last year, and I don't know if that was the first year, Judy, that he had done it, but what we're quoting him for April 17th was, I think he made clear that it was just an estimate.
Yeah, it was a 5%.
It was just his best estimate,
Yeah.
but it wasn't an official number.
Oh, okay.
I think it pretty much became an official number, right? But that was only after the analysis of GPS data and all that. So,
Yeah, we're in I started down that process. I just need the March numbers, and because our last time cards still had March data in it, don't have all the data I need just yet, but I hope to have it next week.
My final comment is I support the approach that Michael started. In other words, he sort of said, hey, we had historical estimates and now we have GPS data. I want to phase in whatever revisions over a period of time.
Okay.
I just want to remind everybody that when we looked at that, there are such large discrepancies between historic pricing and actual hours spent that we decided to limit the change either up or down to 10%. So we gradually move into things and have more than 1 year's worth of data. So that also needs to be factored in this time frame.
Yeah, and that's what I meant, is that's the approach I support.
Okay.
Okay, moving on to propane on page 80. Operating revenues for propane for the year are slightly over plan by about $4,700. You can see that there is a savings in cost of goods sold by about $24,000. Year-to-date total operating for propane is better than planned by $26,000. So propane obviously operating at their normal even keel, taking care of itself. And that is all I have on income statements, unless there are any other questions or comments. Okay. Hearing none, I'll move on to just quickly the balance sheet comparison for February 17 to February 18. Again, it was just a note regarding the total operating cash and reserve cash that when netted together, February 18 is actually down from February 17 by $157,000, but the total reserve is up by $969,000. So we are actually in a better cash position than we were in February of 17. And when comparing the income statement for February 17 to February 18, I just wanted to make a note that when you actually take into account the property tax allocations that show under that G&A allocations line, when you take that out of the equation, the total operating is actually better in 2018 by about $40,000, not the $503,000. So it's just important to take that into account because it's just really a movement of property tax through the income statement. Moving on to February EBITDA. For February, we were better than plan by $91,000, and year-to-date, we are better than plan by $294,000, and that is reflected in our cash position. Moving on to March preliminaries. On page 84 of your packet, March operating revenues, you can see were significantly better than planned by $137,000 in both commercial and residential, which, you know, we've seen through the first few months of the winter season that residential was not performing better than planned. It was all in commercial. So we see that significant increase or pickup in residential revenues for the month of March with the snow. Again, reflects the dependence that we have on Mother Nature. And year-to-date, total operating revenues for this year are up from plan by $294,000. And again, other operating revenues, you'll see we have $54,000 posted, and that is all Cal OES and FEMA funds that came through in March. If we look at the chart up here for March metered versus budget, for kilowatt hours, we were better than planned by 76,000 kilowatt hours and better than last year by 23,000 kilowatt hours. And for propane, we were better than planned by 1.4 million cubic feet and better than last year by 497,000 cubic feet. And if you look, 2018 was our highest ever recorded metered kilowatt hours since we took over the electric department.
For the month of March.
For the month of March, right.
And the January label doesn't mean, is it?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, no, that should say March.
Yeah, okay.
I missed it.
That's all right.
So March was a good month. We will see some increased expenses in March, especially in wastewater with the issues that we had with the infiltration and water, the amount of water that came into the plant. So along with all of that good weather comes some issues. Moving on to cash waterfall, you'll note that total operating cash was at $2.9 million. You also, if you'll note that there was $764,000 in the cushion of credit. We did move $750,000 into the cushion of credit. Being that we are gonna have to make that payment, it was discussed at the Finance Committee meeting that why don't we at least move what we know we're going to have to pay so we can earn some interest on it while we're sitting on that. So we did move $750,000 into the cushion of credit. And that brings our variance to budget at $700,000. I do think that there is some timing of payments that's, included in that, the overage there, but we still have, we're still at a good cash position for the year. I'm saying it's more along the lines of probably $500,000 to $600,000 like we saw on the balance sheet. But still, considering what's coming, I think that's, we're in a better place or a place that we need to be.
And this cushion of credit covers payments through when?
That will
September?
cover payments through June,
Okay.
with a little bit left over. And then, when we get to June, we can move another 700,000 or, what we think the payment is going to be. We're going to have to make the
Through
payments.
October, or
Right.
October 1st.
Exactly. Since we're going to have to make the payments anyway, we might as well at least earn interest on that while we're waiting to make that payment.
But not beyond October 1st.
That's the direction that we're receiving at this point based on the other cash that we're going to have to use.
Thank you.
Nancy?
Kelly, excuse me, Nancy?
So, I always get confused. So reserve, that is the capital reserve, or what does that mean? Reserve. If I go to the balance sheet, where do I visit that number?
It's under capital reserve on the
Okay,
balance sheet.
Okay, thank you.
But my understanding is it's total reserves, electricity and everything else.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
And it also includes the LAIF account too, that $38,000 in the LAIF account, so.
Okay.
There were no additional budget variances for the month of February. This will change in March. There will be budget variances for March, but nothing new for February. And that is all I have on financials.
Good job, both reporting and operating.
Any questions on the financials? If not, we'll move to item B, fiscal year 2018-2019 budget.
Okay, so I'll go through this exactly like I did in the Finance Committee meeting. I'm just going to go through the assumptions, and if you have any questions on the actual summary sheets, we can go through those as you have questions, or, and I would appreciate any comments, corrections. There were definitely several corrections that came out of the Finance Committee meeting that, will be included in the next iteration. There was a correction that Eric pointed out to me on the 2019 consolidated income statement. It had a formula error that wasn't pulling all of the revenues for propane onto that month by month for fiscal year 19. It was corrected and put into the board packet. So the version that was in the Finance Committee packet had the error, and I corrected it and put it in so the board didn't see that correction, but for those that were in the Finance Committee meeting, I wanted to make sure that you knew that there was a change to that 2019 consolidated income statement. So, starting with our government and enterprise funds, as we know, we have two different types. We have government funds, which include G&A, fire, mosquito, and parks and recreation. And we also have enterprise funds, which are electric, propane, water, wastewater, employee housing, cable, snow removal, and solid waste. Number two, for the general and administration department, as we know, all the G&A expenses that are incurred are then allocated out to all of the different departments. All of those departments have a percentage of the G&A expenses that are allocated to them, and there is a small change from last year to this year. We are budgeting to not allocate any expenses or G&A costs or anything to mosquito, which is why you see that change. Granted, they only got 1% of the G&A allocations, but that 1% is now being taken over by the snow removal department. There was quite a bit more of administration that was happening in the snow removal department, so that's the decision was made to move that 1% to snow removal. Other than that, that's the only change we're making to the G&A allocations for this budget.
I'm sorry, can we back up to the very first sentence?
Sure.
I don't understand why it isn't June 30th, 2019, it says 2020.
Yeah, that's one of the...
One of the ones that's
uh-huh.
captured.
Oh, okay, all right, thanks.
So yeah, there are definitely some year changes that are being made.
All right, okay.
And that's why I need another set of eyes to look at this with me.
Kelly, if I could, what does that mean for mosquito abatement?
It just means that we haven't been doing mosquito abatement for the last 2 or 3 years, so we didn't see how it was fair or to the mosquito fund to charge them anything. We weren't doing any mosquito abatement. We have no plans to do mosquito abatement. There's some not permits. Is it permits? What's the?
Well, there's certifications if you want to do it in-house, and Supervisor Woodrow last time put us in contact with someone in Tuolumne County, and so we're getting prices on that. But since the district has not done it in years, we just took it out of the budget at this point. If we decide to bring it back, it would be back for a budget augmentation to the board if we decide to do it if we have a really bad mosquito year. Utilizing a consultant or contractor. Nancy.
Where are the fish? Where does the...
Our fish fund runs out, we're done, there's no more money for us for fish fund.
We'll do one.
We have this
We
year
have one
and
stocking.
and then
Okay.
EID's not gonna give us any
Okay.
more money
Oh, okay.
to do it.
Okay, thank you.
I asked the same question, so I didn't know.
Yeah.
We have a fish fund.
We actually have 2 fish funds, but they're running out. They about I think there's about $11,000 total between the 2, and that'll pay for 1 stocking. And Amy is working on that. Amy's in charge of dealing with the fish people.
If we're not doing it, should we get rid of the department, like mosquitoes or fish? Mosquitoes.
Fish, definitely, when the funds run out and we have no other source
We
of
don't have a
funds.
fish department per se, so yeah.
But if it's really,
Fish fund, or
Yeah.
I guess what I'm saying is mosquitoes first, if we're not doing it, should we get rid of it?
right now we're setting it at 0, I'm waiting to see. But it's been 3 years? Or no, we haven't done it in 3 years. This will be the 4th year. I imagine if we had a really bad year and West Nile was creeping up in the mountains, which of course it doesn't, but if it did, we'd probably want to reinstitute it. So we could drop it off this budget entirely. But I just don't know what the year's going to look like. And there may be some interest from the public or from the board for us to start doing it again. I'm loath to get rid of it at this point until we're definitively sure we're not going to do it.
You don't want to publicize it, but I think there's some misunderstanding out there because you've had mosquitoes at department, whatever, that you were doing it, but there was never per se any people sightings, but people thought you were doing it.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on then to number 3, units sold. The units sold forecast for fiscal year 2019 is based on a combination of fiscal year 2018 actuals and the fiscal year 2018 budget. So as, you know, as we get more actual numbers in, I plug the actuals and the average changes as, you know, because right now we only have through March. When this budget was produced, we only had through April at that point. So I am updating with actuals as it goes. But in lieu of having actuals, we were using the budget number for units sold to get our projections for the fiscal year 19 and beyond. The units sold for electric, propane, water, and wastewater are calculated as the average sales from fiscal years 2015 through 2018 plus 1%, which gives a good representation of high and low volume sales years. Units sold are thereafter increased by 1% annually for fiscal years 2020 through 2023. And units sold for irrigation for 2018 are calculated as the average sales from 15 to 18, which show the impact of the drought period usage restrictions. And units sold thereafter are increased by 1% annually for fiscal years 2020 through 2023. And then I also will include in this as well, I've broken out in years past the construction water or water that was used for snowmaking at Chair 9 was included in the irrigation revenue line, but in reality that is a commercial revenue amount. So I've broken that out from irrigation so that we can see irrigation sales as they are, and snowmaking water sales will be a separate line item and included in the commercial revenue. So I just wanted to make sure that was corrected because it was throwing off the irrigation numbers. It's not, it works the same as irrigation where it doesn't affect wastewater, but the actual revenues are considered a commercial revenue and not irrigation revenue.
So, Kelly, one question on the forecast numbers in the budget. Since we submitted a Russ loan application with a forecasted sales, does that match, or how does it compare to the Russ application?
It's what I had at the time. It matched at the time.
Okay.
So, you know, as like I said, as we get more actuals, the numbers definitely change. But, you know, I gave Howard all the same units sold that were.
That's in the budget. Okay.
And one thing to note is the units sold, the difference between last year's assumptions and this year on, that they took on the average, previously from 14 to 17 was a plus 3.5. We went to a plus 1 this year, and which is also reflecting what we gave Russ, as we thought it was a little more realistic now that we've had a good year in there, not all the drought years. So we backed it off. So I know the board saw the track changes version between the two, but that's one thing I wanted to point out in case anyone didn't see that difference. It went from 3.5 to a 1% increase assumed.
Okay, moving on to number 4, equivalent fixture units. Just for clarification, this is the actual number of customers. It does not have to do with the base rates or multipliers or what we sometimes refer to as EDUs, that when we're figuring out base rate multipliers. This is actually new homes, and there is a new home currently being constructed, which is why a single customer increase is being anticipated for fiscal year 2019. I think I will add another line item in the assumptions in regard to what we call EDUs, or our base rate multipliers, you know, what we...
Definition of terms at the beginning.
Right.
To distinguish, so everybody reading through understands fully what the difference between the two.
And, okay, rates, number 5. Electric base rates are projected to grow by 1% per year for the assumed CPI increase. Usage rates are set to remain at 66 cents for the duration of the budget, and this is to fund new loans that we're seeking out through Russ. And number 3, meter charges are set to remain at $2.94 per month for the or per meter per month for the duration of the budget, and that is one of the changes that I'm going to add to make sure that that's consistent. The reason why we are deciding to keep meter charges for the duration of the budget is due to the fact that there is maintenance and software upgrades that need to happen for us to continue to do this remote read. We're definitely changing out electric and propane meters and things like that. So to be able to fund all of the different mechanisms that go into the remote read system, we decided to continue on with the meter charges rather than cutting those off with just the initial cost of switching over to the remote read, which is what happened last year. The budget was to, as soon as we were done paying off those initial costs that came when we switched over electric and propane to the remote read system and made the improvements to water and wastewater, we were going to cut off those meter charges. But it's just, there's a lot more maintenance and upkeep and software upgrades and things like that that we need to be able to do, and the meter charges are what's going to fund those maintenance and software upgrades. Propane base rates are projected to grow by 1% per year for the assumed CPI increase. Usage rates are set to increase by 1% per year for the assumed CPI increase. And again, meter charges are set to remain constant at $3.36 for the duration of the budget. For water, base rates are projected to grow at 1% per year for the CPI increase. Usage rates are budgeted to increase 34% annually for fiscal years 2019 and 2020, and there will be an additional explanation there that is based on the ordinance that was approved last fiscal year for that 34% annual increase for the next 2 years. 2018 was the first year of that, and we had 2 more years that were approved in last year's ordinance.
And and on that note, I think it might be good too, because the 34% is an eye-popping number, obviously. But the intent was because usage is only like, what, 1/3 of or less of the total cost, that this results in an 8% per year increase for those years.
Total revenue, right.
Revenue,
Nancy, did you have a question?
I gotta keep my hands under my lap.
Oh.
But I do have a question.
Okay.
I'm a reader. So, I know I've asked this question before, but how frequently does the district get information on the CPI increase? I really don't want another increase, but the CPI changes. So are you seeing that it's staying flat at 1%?
No, that's just what we budget for. The CPI increase last year was actually 2.7%.
Okay, so,
Yeah, the question is why don't we budget it that way? So
Yeah.
Because it is volatile. It's not something that does stay flat or constant, so I pull the CPI report at the same time every year, so and I can pull those reports for you. I have them out obviously for the last couple of years, but it's just our practice has been to assume at least a 1%.
But I think we just don't want to count on that revenue.
okay.
Prefer not to count on it.
Right.
So can I have a question on the meter charges? So water and wastewater shows the meter charges in water, but when I look at your statements, a percentage of it is in wastewater. So can you just
Sure,
explain
because wastewater depends on the water meter to get their reads. Wastewater obviously gets a percentage of that revenue. So PCS only allows us to charge the revenue on the meter, and the meters are attached to the water fund. So I do a journal entry to split that revenue between water and
What's
wastewater.
the percentage split?
60-40, 60 for water and 40 for wastewater.
Oh, okay.
And I will, Nancy had brought that up at the Finance Committee meeting, and I will be including that
That
note.
comment in there,
Mhm.
yeah, okay.
I think it was Nancy. Yeah, okay. So, yeah, obviously, those are things
Okay.
that need to be explained. Wastewater, base rates are projected to grow by 1% per year for the annual CPI increase, and usage rates are budgeted to increase 19% annually for fiscal years 19 and 20, and 1% thereafter, so I need to add that as well. The same thing for water, the 34% for 19 and 20, and then 1% for the remaining years of the budget. Irrigation usage rates are budgeted to increase at 8% annually for 19 and 20, and 1% thereafter for 21 through 23. Meter charges are again set to remain constant at $3.30 per meter per month, and that obviously is not split. The irrigation meter charges stay with the irrigation meters. Solid waste base rates are budgeted to increase at 4% annually for fiscal years 19 and 20, and 1% thereafter. Snow removal contract rates are budgeted to increase by 1% annually for the assumed CPI increase. And fire department, there is no rate increase assumed for the fire department. Last year's budget, there was a large increase for the assessment fees that are incurred at 4 cents per square foot annually. But due to the fact that there is such a big drive for alternative funding sources for the fire department, we've chosen not to include increase for the fire department in this budget.
So I did want to mention this because this is nowhere else on the agenda, so I thought I would just mention it now. Maybe it could be put on the agenda for discussion, I guess next month, although I won't be here next month, but next month or in June. So I do think that revenue increases should be anticipated for the next fiscal year, not this coming fiscal year, but for the next one. I think our goal is to determine a method, a preferred method or methods of raising revenues for the fire department no later than December, so that if we have to go through the 218 process, we will have time to do that for the next fiscal year. So, but the subcommittee, the ad hoc committee, which is Alan Sapp and John and woman named Tony Sirica from East Meadows, have all agreed that we should explore other avenues before we go the special tax route. And that's just going to take some time to do.
For those, to add those revenue increases for fiscal years 2020 through 2023, is the suggestion for the increase to be what it was in last year's?
Well, that's what I would suggest. Now, the thing is that this requires more discussion because, in the end, it's tied to how much new property tax is going to be available. And that's tied to how well electricity does. It's tied to that GASB 68, or what it's called, and which we never know what's going to happen. So we never know if our property tax available for the fire department is going to be 0 or 100,000. We just never know. Which is the reason that we want to get a consistent source of funding for it. So I don't know. I mean, what I would just do is just move that number over a year, but that's just my suggestion. We have never talked about it.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable suggestion going forward. I mean, we're out, years 2 through 5, not this next coming year, and it's just it's a placeholder, and I think it's a good mark for us to aim towards. So
something to aim for,
I think
yeah.
that's reasonable unless there's any pushback. I think we'll make that adjustment.
All right. Property taxes, we all know they're earned over the course of a fiscal year. We accrue property tax each month. posting that revenue each month, but actual cash is received generally in January and June, are when we receive our two biggest payments. We receive smaller payments throughout the year. Mostly for Mello-Roos is, the stuff that we receive throughout the year, but as far as, large property tax payments from Alpine County is where we receive most of our property tax revenue from, comes in January and June. And the way that those property tax revenues are allocated is first to ensure the Russ tier ratio of 1.05 is covered, and I'm also going to include in this the next go round of this that what our ratios are for all of our 4 different ratios that we have to meet. It's not just the 1.05 tier ratio. We have an O tier ratio of 1%, and there are 2 other ratios that we have to meet. I think those are all at 1% as well. But
1.0.
yeah, 1.0. Yeah, 1.0. So it's important to note that the tier ratio is not the only ratio we have. We have covenants to meet. Then the property tax revenue is to cover any cash losses in departments, with the governmental funds being those that get that property tax revenue first, fire department, Parks and Rec, and in the past, mosquito. Any remaining revenues will be used to fund capital improvements. If all of the above are covered and there are any property tax revenues left, it would be used to fund a cash reserve. And then again, the significant annual unknown is the GASB 68 expense or credit. That's just the one thing that is impossible to predict. We've had a swing for the last 3 years where the first year we had a credit, second year we had a large expense, and then last year we had another credit. I don't know if that's a pattern, with it or not. We don't have enough data to know whether that's what the pattern is going to be. I like to err on the side of we're going to get hit with an expense. I just, that's, and if we get a credit, then we can, do a dance for it. It's the one thing that when you're trying to do a budget is very frustrating when you don't know what's going to happen. And
Kelly, I'm sorry for,
No.
I should just add that Bruce Gianola is also on our ad hoc committee, but he wasn't able to participate in our last discussion. So hopefully he will be in our next discussion.
Property tax revenues for fiscal year 2019 are budgeted at $825,000 and thereafter increased by 1% annually for the balance of the budget.
I just would like to go back to the rate section.
Sure.
Is there any of these rate assumptions that are not in our current ordinances? Now, I know the fire department increase is not in our current ordinance, but for example, the meter stuff, is that something we need to change where we had an expiring meter charge, or are we avoiding changing it by keeping it constant?
You're avoiding changing it by keeping it constant.
Right.
It's the same at the 66 cents. It's the same principle. No action
So
required.
our ordinances cover all these rate assumptions. Okay, thank you.
Number 7, funds transfers. Although you, in the budget package that you received, the cash portion is not a part of this because I am currently working on the cash and balance sheet portion of the budget. We do assume that there will be fund transfers between electric and the water and wastewater funds to cover any cash losses that happen in those two departments. We are required to do interfund loans, which is something that was new last year. We had been required to do that. We just hadn't been doing that, but last year was the first year that we did that. And so if water and wastewater have cash losses that aren't able to be covered by property tax revenues, then we will have to do an interfund loan between those departments and electric. And they'll begin to be repaid with interest once the COPs are paid off in fiscal year 2024.
Eric, I thought you and I had a discussion at one point where we might not be able to afford to do that. So are we going to do that, or are we not going to do that?
Based on the 3% adjustment on that analysis to RUS
Oh, I
instead of
see.
5.5, it's much more feasible now. Yeah, looking at the 5.5, it was definitely not feasible. So, if we use the
So
three-
the other answer is we're doing it for budget purposes, but we might not do it for actual purposes.
yes, that's possible, absolutely.
If we don't have the cash to do it, we just can't, but,
Or if there's property tax available. That
Right.
would be our first choice.
Okay, thanks.
salaries and wages. This budget assumes 19 full-time year-round staff, which represents no increase to staffing levels compared to fiscal year 18. It anticipates 3% in raises in July of 2018 in the amount of about $40,000. It anticipates a performance review bonus for all staff in December of 2018, totaling about $12,000, which is approximately 1% of annual salaries. And it also budgets for a discretionary bonus of $5,000 for the general manager. And I'm going to change the wording there. It's the bonus is paid out in the beginning of the next fiscal year, but the actual expense is recorded in the prior fiscal year. So there was a little bit of confusion there, so I'm going to update the wording there just to make it a little bit clearer. It anticipates the hiring of 5 temporary snow removal operators in November of 2018 at a rate of, which we're going to change. This says 15 to 18. We're changing that to 16.
Average rate of...
An average rate of 17
I
was,
believe
yeah,
that's fine.
per hour.
Is that your recollection? Yeah, 17?
17 per hour, yeah. We are completely deleting E. We are not going to anticipate the hire of a temporary snow removal manual laborer. It does anticipate the hiring of a temporary fire department operator in November of 2018 at a rate of $17 per hour and terminating at the beginning of April 19. And I'm also going to add that this temporary fire department operators generally funded through the fundraising activities that happen in the summer.
No, I know that has been the case. I just don't think it should be the case.
Okay.
I mean, I think that money should go for capital needs. And that one reason that we need to raise money for the fire department is to fund this kind of thing. I just don't think that should be coming out of we have done it because it's been available, but my opinion is that money really should go for capital equipment needs that are difficult to fund otherwise. That's my opinion.
I'd like to know the consensus of the board on that, because that does dramatically change things. It requires more reliance on property tax for this budgeting cycle, possibly.
Well, I think
That
Eric's
deficit.
comment I view as aspirational as opposed to
Yes.
next fiscal
Oh,
year.
okay.
Yeah, no, I just don't, yes, I mean, this is
Oh.
really for once we can raise the money for the fire
Okay,
department.
I'm with
But,
you.
yeah, for this coming fiscal year, that's what we do.
Okay.
But I really don't think that we should make that the way we do it, always.
I understand, my apologies. I thought you were
Okay.
saying we should change it for this one, but
No.
once we get the
Once we
funding
get the
mechanism in
funding
place,
and
agreed
everything.
100%. Yeah, it should be self-funding.
Okay. Moving on to operating expenses.
And just one thing, to go back on salaries, I know we provided the explanation at finance, but historically, the district has given a 3% raise and a 1% bonus. And as far back as anyone can remember, they've only ever captured a 1% increase. I thought it was important to actually capture what's really been happening, so that's why that was a definite change from prior budgeting
Right.
purposes. Previously only budgeted 1%, and realistically, they should have been budgeting 4%.
Did you have a question, Bob?
No.
Oh, okay.
I was just listening intently.
It looked like you were going to say something.
But Eric's prior comment, my sense is that what we've sort of promised the community or advertised to the community is that it is for capital, a specific capital expenditure. Now, I'm sure we have disclosed, and I would encourage you to disclose this year that if we're raising money from the community for a temporary firefighter, then it's properly disclosed.
I'm almost certain in the current letter that went out, it discussed the temporary seasonal firefighter. I'm almost positive. Jess, you wrote it?
It discusses the funding for more SCBA's and for seasonal firefighters.
Thank you.
And sort of a tangential comment is that I find myself sitting here, having been on the board for 6 or 7 years, not understanding the mosquito comment. I don't remember when we made the decision not to do mosquito abatement. Do you guys?
No, I mean, it surprised me, actually. And then-
Well, that's what I'm saying.
And Eric explained to me that I had never heard that the person who was certified to do it left the district.
No, he's still here. He just let his certifications expire.
He let his certifications expire.
And the training for it is multi-day training, which is offered very far away from here. It's, I believe, Fresno is one, and not Eureka, but somewhere that way.
It's like 36 hours of continuing education units that you can only receive off-site, couldn't do it online. So we'd have to send the employee down there for a couple days to get, probably 3 or 4 days to get all the requirements, then take a test, and then it's just the cost. But really, the reason why we stopped doing it was the drought. We didn't have a need for it for several years, and then as time went on, his certification expired, and to get him recertified through all the new requirements by the state, it was just cost prohibitive. So,
Thank you.
Okay, moving then on to operating expenses. Operating expenses for fiscal years 2019 through 2023 are budgeted to increase by 1% annually, with some additional costs, and we've listed out some of the additional costs here. For GASB 68 compliance, we budgeted for $4,000. I did speak to Moss Adams, and I had mentioned that possibly this cost could go down. They've advised me to still budget for $4,000, but if I am able to complete all of the calculations and journal entries necessary on my own with them just auditing those, the cost would go down to $2,500. I am going to try my best to figure it out on my own this year, but I'm not making any promises. It's a difficult calculation, and if I should share the spreadsheet with everybody just so you guys know I promise I'm not
I'd rather pay the $4,000.
yeah, okay. I appreciate that, Bob.
Additional training on that too. Don't we have a class set up for that?
No, that was
Oh,
GASB
75.
I just think,
75,
given
yeah.
everything we have going on, I don't know that it's the best possible use of your time to try to save this line item.
Okay. I am
Through
going
your
to, I am going to try to do it by myself, but I am not going to be afraid to ask them for help if necessary. We have CGA, which Brandy again is emissions testing, which I'm going to spell out a few of these a little better so we actually know what they are. For $6,000, we have switchgear testing at $10,000. We have the powerhouse, which I will spell out, permit revision at $5,000. The leak survey for propane at $10,000, and trackless push frames for snow removal at $5,000.
We're removing that.
We're taking that off, and I'm going to put a few more details in here that have come from the operating side of the budget with some more details in there.
So is the work that's planned on the operating side for the wastewater treatments, wastewater system, is that covered otherwise in the budget?
That would be a capital, not an operating expense for the feasibility study if we opt to do
Well,
that.
no, I was really talking about the leak survey. I actually thought the leak survey was for water, for wastewater.
No,
But it's for
we,
propane, but.
for the, going down the I&I path, which I think is where you're heading, we've budgeted that in capital as well. Because that will, one, we're going to do, well, assuming we budget for it, assuming that's the board's preference, smoke testing is one of the first things we're going to do. I've started getting information on jetters and cameras as well, so we can do our own line cleaning and video our lines, the ones that didn't get done previously. And then we're going to do capital improvements based on what is found. So one of the things we already are looking at, based on the I&I, which Rick will talk about later, is raising all the manholes in the meadow such that no matter how Vail ramps their snow for the cross-country track, they can't show water into our system, which was really the predominant source of the water we received last weekend. So even though the smoke testing isn't a capital expenditure in and of itself, it produces capital expenses. That's why it's being put into capital. It's an engineering study, for lack of a better phrase. And on the jetter / camera, we pay, when we had the blockage on Fremont Danburg, we paid $3,600 for one trip out here. I could buy our own jetter / camera for about $15,000. 5 trips and that thing is paid for itself. The ROI is amazing. So that's on the capital side. So all those things kind of feed into that.
Okay, Kelly, that leak survey, the propane, is that just with our distribution, or does this go out to the residential? And
You have to ask Brandy about that one.
In the past, we've done our distribution system and to the residential, to each individual meter.
Okay.
And we'll be looking at that again this year.
And this is a CPUC requirement every 10 years, and this is our 10th year. We are required to do it.
Since this goes into the document, I would actually put propane leaks
We-
survey and thing.
Yep. It's in the list of changes. It's nice to see that you all think the same.
Fools rarely differ.
Moving on to balance sheet, which again will be included in the next iteration. This section really has no changes. It's just really a list of definitions here about what is considered in each of the different funds on the balance sheet. Again, unearned revenue relates to snow removal activities due to the fact that we post our revenue for snow removal out, but we bill in 4 installments, or 1 installment for residential customers and 4 installments for HOAs. So we essentially have unearned revenues because we receive that cash, and then the revenue is allocated out through the 6-month period. And cushion of credit, we know that this just relates to prepaid principal and interest payments for our RUS loans, and we earn 5% interest on that cushion of credit account. The RUS loan, again, this is just updated interest and principal payments. The grid shows the combination of short-term and long-term draws that were used for these funds with terms between 3 years and 35 years. The average interest rate on these loans is about 2.99%. And this budget does assume the rollover of any loans that are coming due in this budgeting period. And I did use the average rate of 2.99% to roll over those loans in this budget. The COP loan, again, we received $5.095 million for the COP, and it was used to upgrade the membranes at the wastewater treatment plant, to fund a portion of the Mountain Utilities acquisition, to fund the upgrade of the remote read. That should not just say water meters, that should say remote read meters in general, because it was to fund electric, propane, and water. And to fund the initial costs of the water capacity study. It is a 10-year loan maturing in April of 2023, which is in the 2024 fiscal year. And it's got a 4.8% interest rate, and there's just a breakdown of the interest and principal payments for the budgeting period. The Bank of the West loan was received in November of 2012 in the amount of $700,000. It is a 10-year loan maturing in November of 2022 and has a 3.98% interest rate. And there is just a breakdown of the payments, interest and principal payments through ending in the 2023 fiscal year. The district also does have a $400,000 line of credit with Bank of the West, which is currently unused and has a zero balance. And that is basically an emergency backup that we have that we hope we won't ever have to use, but it is there if we need to. Sure.
So where is that, since it was miscellaneous expenses, so is the interest payment, where is that reflected in the budget? Like what fund or? is it G&A?
It's actually held in the electric department.
Okay.
And the interest payments are allocated out from electric, so all of the departments pay in for the interest payments, but we can't hold debt in a governmental fund, so it's the debt is held in the electric department.
Thank you.
So now just some changes and corrections that were noted. The number of EDUs were corrected in each fund that relates to that base rate issue that was noted. Meter charges, again, are reflected to continue to be billed for the length of the budget to cover costs to replace meters and maintenance on the remote read system. Salaries, wages, and benefits and taxes reflect the 3% and 1% raises and bonuses in the fiscal years following 2019, whereas in the past, we did the 3% and 1% in the current, the first year of the budget, but then reflected it as 1% in the following years of the budget. We now reflect the 3% raise and 1% bonus in all of the following years of the budget rather than just the 1% like we do for expenses. This budget assumes a one-time equivalent payout of the Out Valley O&M costs to PG&E in lieu of construction of a switch station, which is why when you look at the summary sheet for electric, the line item that says PG&E O&M, there's only expenses listed there through 2019. It is then reflected in amortization, which we plan to amortize that one-time payout over 30 years. So the
30 or
one-time
35?
payout. I'm sorry?
30 or 35?
I have it at 30. Because it was the length of the Out Valley project. We're already about 5 years in, so it was 30 years.
Okay.
So on that point C, maybe it's D, are you including all the ramifications of our preferred dispute resolution? Such as, okay, you mentioned O&M. Are you including the additional RUS debt that we've applied for?
No, this is just the one-time payout that I've included. I have not included the new C8 loans in the interest and principal payments. I can, obviously, I can add that, but I have not. I've only included the one-time payout.
This is one of those things, is after we get done with closed session, is reconciliating
Right.
my cash flow with her cash flow, which includes the C8.
Okay. Second, well, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to, the final thing was just that the budget assumes no expenses or G&A allocations will be made to the mosquito fund.
I have two questions. One is, so Eric, this is your first time through this. Kelly's been through the ringer here quite a few years. How do you feel about where we are with this budget? And a related question is, given that plus where we are with the budget plus the PG&E hopeful resolution, when do you think we'll be in a position, when should we be thinking about approving this? May or June?
Hey.
Not May.
Not May.
So,
Yeah.
yes, I think we've erred on the side of caution. We've been a little conservative in this budget, especially given the
We'll
increase.
appreciate that the day after you approve it.
You know, in the last 6 months, we've really buckled down on expenses knowing that this was coming. I think you see that reflected in the balance statements and balance sheets you've been looking at. We've been trying not to expend, and so we've erred on the side of caution. We've extended that theory into the budget. Looking ahead to what I think we have to do with PG&E, one of our many options, which the board will have to ultimately decide. I'm not happy, but I'm comfortable that we will be okay. And capital will be significantly reduced, and that means we need to look for grants and low-interest loans to finance any capital projects such as wastewater if we're going to do it, which is why I've suggested that approach with wastewater is get the study, get the idea of what we need to do, get a definitive plan, then go find the money to do those things. Don't automatically assume we're going to do it. So capital is going to be very tight. I've already mentioned to all the managers multiple times that budget is going to be very tight over the next 5 years. But I'm comfortable. In terms of when we can adopt this, I think based on the direction, if there is any out of closed session today, to proceed down a path, I think we can resolve this issue and budget accordingly and have it accurately reflected by the June board meeting. Then that's my 2 cents, and I'd love any of the other temporary advisory committee on PG&E to weigh in whether is that your indications of where you think we're going to, you think it will be there?
June or July. We'll know probably the rest loan the week after the 4th of July, right? July 10th is when they
90 days.
promised us.
And they've already been asking for additional information and promising to accelerate faster. So I'm hopeful, but not planning that we could see it sooner. And we do have those meetings so close back to back between June and July that it's our board meeting is July 1st. So we're really close on that. We have a June 12th and a July, I think it's the 12th and then July 1st.
My thought would be to have a semifinal version discussed in June, expecting not a lot of changes, and push as hard as you can to get the Russ approval before the July 1st board meeting.
Absolutely.
But that's just one of...
That's all I have on the budget. I wasn't going to go through each summary sheet unless you had specific questions or wanted me to. I see shaking heads, so.
I think we're good with what we've done so far. So we'll forego the individual sheets there. That's okay with everyone?
Yeah, this is the time of year where it'd be most helpful if the board has any comments to redline them and send them back to Kelly, because then she sort of runs them through all those spreadsheets, I assume.
Very good. Any comments from the audience? Well, thank you, Kelly.
Thank you.
That will...
You going to run through capital at all?
Sorry.
You got done with your portion. I'd be running too.
Okay. Yes, we should.
Yeah, I can
Telling
handle
you.
it. Thank you. So you can see the overall capital budget, the 5-year total. You can see that there's a large portion in there for the switch station construction. If you look at the 5-year total, there's $8.9 million. The bulk of that is the switch station and or the alternative to the switch station, whatever that might be. So though that number looks large, the rest of the budget, once that's taken out, is relatively conservative. So with that said, I'll just run briefly through what we're talking about in the various departments. And I'll try and go fast. I know we have a deadline, so I want to get through this. And any questions, just interrupt me, please, because I'll be looking at my spreadsheet. Absolutely.
So based upon your earlier statement that it's likely that the departments need to back off on their capital expenditures, is that reflected here?
Or is
No,
that
this is what we believe is needed,
Okay.
but projects will only be done as funds are available.
okay, got it, thank you.
So essentially, if these items are budgeted and we have sufficient funds to complete them, I don't have to come back and bother the board with reapproving something. This was basically going, here's our wish list, and this is a very pared down wish list. This is a desperation list, not a wish list. But yeah, no, that's a good point. Thank you. Just briefly looking at water, we've budgeted no capacity components in the next 5 years. There are some further out in the 35-year plan, but that's very, very much subjective. We did budget a little bit for next year in water in terms of replacement components, and those are the ones we believe are the most dire of anything we had to do. Again, and we added this year, we also added a priority, a scaling of 1 to 5, 1 being critical, 5 being the least critical, so you can see what staff has indicated is the most important of what needs to be done for this next year in terms of replacement, which would be the interrogator and the well-to-roof repair. Those two things we believe need to be done. And on the meter interrogator, that actually has a pretty high return on investment potentially if we find meters that are malfunctioning. So that's why that one was in. We went ahead and included that if budget allows. Moving on to wastewater, we do have the feasibility study, which I think is critical to get done because as every week that goes by, something else happens at the wastewater plant. And we need to get a solid plan under us determining what we're going to do. So we budgeted in terms of capacity only for the feasibility study in the next 5 years. In terms of replacement components, the story is a little bit different. I believe I&I is critical to do. It costs us money. I'm in the process of quantifying the actual what it costs us to treat all the I&I, and I think it's going to show that the repairs, the return on investment is immediate in terms of I&I repairs, and trails off as we get down to the lesser repairs, but there's some glaring ones that we can do. I mentioned the meadow. I continue to believe that that's a significant return on investment, probably going to cost us less than $5,000 per manhole to fix, and that would have, I would argue, prevented the spill this last Saturday.
When you say raise the elevation,
Mhm.
what is,
So the manholes,
how high up? And
yes. So the manholes are currently set not quite at grade. I think they have a 4-inch ring above grade, more or less. Let's just say that.
Okay.
Some of the surrounding grade slopes directly into them. Some of it doesn't. I would propose putting on at least somewhere between 2 and 4, depending on the surrounding grounds, 2 to 4 feet of additional elevation on those, such that, again, to keep Vail from ramping water directly into our things.
so did they then hit it instead?
No, they're staked now. I mean,
Oh, okay.
Vail hits our stake stuff already.
Right. Okay. But we're giving them a more
Cars hit
solid-
our stake stuff already.
We're giving them a more solid target.
We're giving them a more solid target, and repairs are done on them if they hit those things. But the stakes are already there,
Okay.
and we add extensions on in the winter, and that will continue to be the case. But we'll also use something called ThoroSeal, which is sort of a bitumastic compound inside and out, which also eliminates intrusion through the rings. I don't know if those are gasketed rings, but anyway, this is a pretty quick fix, cheap fix, again, that I would argue would have stopped us spilling 50,000 gallons of sewage.
And is there a visual impact in the summer for hikers?
Yes. I'm not going to lie. There's absolutely a visual impact, but no more so than existing above-grade transformers that are in the meadow. If you look where the path of these manholes is, generally they're along the same path as where our transformers are. There's a couple further out. But yes, there will absolutely be a visual
And
impact.
how many total are there?
It's 11? 8 to 11, depending on how far we go. Is that about right?
The low spot, probably 11.
Yeah.
But we could go up to 18.
11 to 18 at 5,000 feet.
Yeah, but that would depend on, I would hit the most critical first. Again, in terms of I&I, the approach for that is we're a MASH unit, we're doing triage. Who's the most critical?
Yeah.
your arm's cut off, yeah, but your chest is ripped open. I'm going for the chest ripped open first. So we're,
Thank you for the analogy.
well, I think it's important to understand that from my perspective as an engineer, it is that bad.
Yeah.
And I think it's a...
So this is definitely something that needs to be communicated to the public because of the visual impact.
Sure.
You know, it's going to be something that's going to be a shock, I think, to people
Yeah.
who walk around the meadow all the time.
No, and I think we're probably going to do an article in the newsletter about the recent spill and what caused it, and I think we're going to talk about our potential fixes, which would include this.
Okay, and people's imaginations might be worse than what it actually looks like, so we might want to do an
We
illustration.
will include photos. We have some photos that you'll see from Rick today that are actuals,
Okay.
and that's what we will include those. It's definitely worse in your mind than it actually
We do have a
looked.
graphic artist on staff that could easily render what the change would look like if you want.
Oh, okay. All right.
That's Corey.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's see, the hot water heater in the main lift, that needs to be replaced. There's no two ways about it, that has to be done. The jetter camera, again, it's really an optional item, but, and now that I've gotten quotes, that number's wrong and I will be adjusting it up. Fortunately, my former employer's wastewater supervisor is going through pricing these out right now, so I'm stealing all of his research, so I'm being as efficient as I can. And but again, at $3,500 for the Fremont Dangbird backup, the ROI is there. It just simply is. So important for us to do. And then in terms of treatment, again, feasibility study, that component that is the replacement component. The centrifuge polymer feed system, we are continually fighting that. It's exploded a couple times on us and needs to be replaced. It's cost us in labor and materials more than $5,000 this year, or in the 6 months I've been here alone. So this replacement is money well spent. And the high core brush replacement, something we've never done. It should be done every 3 years. We found out when it failed that we should have been doing it. We're now going to budget for it because that is much cheaper than replacing that unit. So those are the ones that I've identified as absolutely critical. You'll notice that the roof is not listed as right now to do. I want to get the feasibility study done first. I understand Howard and I as engineers, we disagree on that, but we agree on most everything else about the wastewater plant, but that is a point of disagreement. I wish he was here. But I think I need to understand what we're going to do as a total plan, a holistic approach for that wastewater plant instead of piecemealing it. So that's why it's out there. I know that was a discussion before.
Eric, if I could
Absolutely.
just focus on this roof repair for a little bit, because do we have plans to do any repair to try to eliminate some of the leaking
Not this
in
fiscal
this
year.
year?
No.
That's a concern to me, because we do have a problem in the staff, rooms that they're using. That concerns me there. Is that a health safety issue?
Yeah, I understand the concern, and I guess my only comment would be if the cheaper alternative from the feasibility study is to abandon that building and do a prefab metal building or some such thing. If that's the cheaper alternative, then we've thrown good money after bad.
Well, I'm not suggesting we spend 120 just arbitrarily this year, because we don't have it. I'm just talking about trying to eliminate some of the leaking, a repair, without going into a full roof
Sure.
repair, just to, try to remedy the problem we have,
Yeah.
where we're having a large percentage of it anyway.
And we can, I don't know how much you're thinking what we could do. Now that snow is mostly off the roof, we could try and get a roofer out here, which is nigh impossible, and see what they would recommend as Band-Aid repairs, and then we could budget it accordingly as we come forward.
I'd be more comfortable with that. For those who haven't toured it,
Yeah.
we have a serious problem in there.
I just don't think we can ignore it.
Yeah.
I understand your budgeting strategy, but I just don't think we can ignore it anymore. I agree with Jeff on that.
I'd recommend we get a roofer up to take a look at what we might do in the short term.
Okay.
Because even if we were if we decide the building is, obsolete and we're going to replace it, we're not going to replace it next year. And we're going to spend $120,000 to repair the roof before we do anything with the building. So we're going to spend money on it. We might as well spend a little ahead of time and at least make the working situation a little bit better in there.
Okay. We'll get if that's the consensus of the board, we'll get a roofer out to get us an estimate, and I can include it in the next iteration of the budget if we have it by then.
Jeff, can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
If we go through all of these line items, it's pretty long.
Well, that's why I'm skipping.
Well, I was going to suggest maybe just see if there are questions on
Okay.
specific ones.
Okay. All right. Anything else on wastewater? Any questions? Okay. And it continues on to the next page, of course.
I'll just say the planning committee did look through this at this last planning committee meeting, and I think we were pretty satisfied that it was a good list of stuff and properly prioritized.
Employee housing, nothing budgeted, except there was questions last time about concrete coring, so I'll expound on that just briefly, because I think that one's important to understand, impotent to understand. Right now, about every couple of years, we get a black mold issue in units, and it has to do with inadequate venting of washer dryers, essentially, and hot water heaters. We just spent $2,800 on Drew's apartment cleaning it because of black mold. If the units were properly vented, we would avoid that issue. So the theory is to hire a concrete coring company to come in and horizontally core the units, and then have our staff plumb the venting properly outside so as to avoid repeated ServPro charges every year or every other year for cleaning up mold and mildew issues. And so that just a quick explanation on that. Any questions on that? I don't know. Rick? I'm looking to you. Kelly?
11 or 12 years?
Yeah, I think it's 11 or
Something like
12.
that.
Maybe longer.
And right now, we do have to buy special dryer units that are in internal venting, and it's more expensive to buy those. Same with the hot water heaters. We have to buy special. So it trickles down in terms of reduced cost. Again, trying to be extra conservative here. This is, I think, a proactive approach to save money ultimately. Any questions on employee housing? Any others? Okay, moving on to fire. The only thing we still have in the current one is the light rescue command vehicle. That's obviously contingent on the fire funding temporary advisory committee and how we proceed with that, but that is getting to a needed state in terms of replacement. We're pushing the life on that, so something we definitely have to do in the next 5 years. Any other questions on fire?
On the SCBA's?
Yes.
Was that what we funded for this year in the barbecue money that we were
Yes.
funding to get that equipment, and we got an alternative source, didn't we?
We funded, this year should complete all the funding needed to get us close to the $84,000 to purchase the 12 air packs. So last year we net about 42,000 is what it was for like. Yeah, yeah. So this year we hope to get at least 35,000 net. Between those two, we could actually purchase the air packs. If we don't get the AFG grant, which I'll hear about probably mid-month.
I guess that's where I thought we had an arrangement where we could bypass that expense.
That would be the AFG grant.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yeah, we tagged on East Alpine on that, or the...
We're hoping to either tag on with the Tri-County or
Right.
Lake Valley,
Lake-
Eastern Alpine County, and us, possibly one other department fall on leave. But if not, we'll stand alone and get it on our side.
So before the fiscal year this fiscal year is up, you will or you won't purchase whatever?
It'll be 2015 18-19 fiscal year.
Next fiscal year.
Okay, so then you, and I don't know how this works, so then you'll take, the district will take the money that had been raised for those items and temporarily restrict them, so that money isn't theoretically spent because it was raised for.
Oh, no, the money's set aside right now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And it's
Okay.
a dedicated
It's-
fund for fire department capital.
Oh, okay, okay. So in other words, that capital.
The only
fund-
thing it was used for this year was to fund the temporary firefighter.
Right.
That's the only thing that's been used in this fiscal year, if I'm not mistaken, Kelly.
So we'll see the capital fund for fire increase by the amount of money for those SCBA's that aren't being purchased?
No, we have a reserve right now in fire. The way that works is there is, the money that comes in from the fundraising.
Fundraising.
Yeah.
Right, there's a portion that goes to our 501c3 account. That portion that was in the 501c3 account has come back over, but there's also portions that go into our regular revenue account. So we haven't had to touch our reserve account right now. So in reality, that money is sitting in the reserve account. We have $149,000 sitting in the reserve account because the money that comes in from the fundraising events goes into our revenue account and into our 501c3 account.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me. It just seems like if you haven't spent the money, you should be taking that pot of money and putting it over here for that item.
Well, we haven't spent the money. It's sitting in the reserve. Had we not spent the money that comes in from those that goes into our revenue account, we would have been pulling money from the reserve account. So we haven't been pulling money from the reserve account to fund all of our regular fire department funds. So it's just a 6 one way, half a dozen the other type of situation where that we're not touching our reserve account. There's $149,000 sitting in that reserve that we haven't had to pull from because the money is going into our revenue account and into our 501c3 account from the fundraising events.
Okay, any other questions on fire? All right, moving on to electric. Any questions on electric?
I just have one comment or a suggestion. So I think our peak demand has been like 3.8 megawatt, something like that. So, and we have 5 currently, so 8 is aspirational. Right, we should be so lucky. I think in the time frame of getting to 8, I think we should just competitively analyze buying storage instead of generation. It has the obvious benefit also that on a switchover, there would be no disruption, theoretically no disruption at all, and it'll allow us to do hedging. Because we can store power when it's even cheaper. You can get paid to store power at the right time of day. So I just think that should be constantly viewed as an alternative.
Okay.
And you can get state money. There's a variety of programs to supplement on storage. So there may be a point in time when it's optimal to do it, and we should just be keeping track of that.
That's a good point. Thank you.
Potentially we build a dirt.
Yeah, yay.
Well, I still want my indoor
Are you serious?
tennis court, but
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
If the storage is small enough, we could put it there. That's true.
Okay, any other questions on electric? What these items are or anything like that? Okay. Okay, moving on to propane. We pushed the propane tank off a couple more years. We have discussed with Kiva the possibility of bringing a tanker truck up here in an emergency if we were in that situation where we could foresee that before the passes closed. That is possible. What I will tell you, though, we did add another item in here, which is the propane tank valve replacement. It got very dicey. We had a valve failing between the 2 tanks, such that even though one tank was full, we were going to run out of propane. Was it Christmas or New Year's? New Year's, in the valley. And we couldn't get Kiva up here, so this goes back to the tank issue, but that valve absolutely must be replaced this summer when demand is nothing. There's no question we have to do it. It was sticking and such that it was, one tank wouldn't feed the other and it had to go through the other to get out to the distribution system.
What line item is that?
If you go down under replacement component, it is propane tank valve replacement, $10,000. Yeah. So that's definitely something we'll be doing. Meter replacement, just so you know, that's not an optional item. That's required by CPUC, 10% per year replacement. So that's included there as well.
Just one question on the meters. The batteries have a 5-year warranty. So when that happens, do we just replace the battery, not the whole unit?
Well, sometimes. Sometimes there's no way to open them up and replace the batteries, as we just found out on one unit.
On the electric meters.
But those don't have a battery.
They have a backup battery.
Oh, the backup battery, all right. But the water and propane run
Only off a battery since they have no power source.
And the electrics also have to be replaced 10% every year, I believe, right? Oh, no, just propane. Just propane.
Yeah.
We were just replacing the ones that were, giving us grief. That weren't reading correctly. Any other questions on propane? Okay. Moving on to snow removal, no new capacity components. All the items that are budgeted, snow removal self-funding, so those items are needed. It's an every year almost on most of those items. Any questions? Okay. All right. Moving on to cable, nothing except for just some annual expenses there. Parks and Rec, just the replacement, the repairs. Solid waste, replacing dumpsters, recycling bins, shared components. As you may or may not have noticed, I don't think you guys were here during we haven't had any good rate events during a board meeting, and the one time we did, you couldn't get up here. But we do have a significant leak right there, leaking over that window. So the roof needs to be repaired there. The windows, the gaskets are displacing, for lack of a better word, shrinking. Yeah, they're just, so that's making our HVAC inefficient. Fall protection, one thing I noticed when I first got here was that all the fixed ladders don't have Cal OSHA required fall protection, so we will be getting in compliance with Cal OSHA before there's any event. Same with shoring. We rent shoring, but at the price we rent it, buying our own shores is a preferred alternative. And those are the priorities. Any questions on that? Good. Well, then I'm done with capital then.
Good. Any questions? Now we'll move on to the performance reporting and the aquifer levels. Randy?
So this is a list of topics of varying severity. When does it get translated into what we are going to spend? Meaning I see the numbers behind it, but I'm not...
So these are budgeted items, and you'll notice that historically the district has never included capital in terms of its cash flow and budgeting. So if we do need to do these, it'll be brought back to the board in discussion. These are basically for placeholders only of what we need to do. And as funds are available, if we get grant funds, FEMA funds, low interest loans, then certain projects can be undertaken.
So none of this is in the budget to be spent this year?
No. It never, I was shocked when I went through the old budgets. The capital was never included on those cash flow items. They were budgeted, but they were never included in terms of cash flow projections, which always surprised me.
So they were budgeted from a capital project standpoint, but not from a what Kelly's doing standpoint?
Well, there's, on that bottom section that wasn't included in this iteration of the budget, there was a line item for capital items that, we included. We didn't include all of the capital items that were on there. We included the the biggest, most necessary ones. So when I finish the cash portion of the budget, when you get that bottom section on the summary sheet that has all the cash and operating and capital, there is a line item for us to include what we want to include on there. It's just, it was never included in its entirety in the budget. There was if you look at last year's budget, you can see on that bottom section, there is a line item for capital purchases, but not all of the capital purchases were included in their entirety.
Sure, and I don't think they should be.
Right.
But I guess what I'm proposing, or thinking out loud, is in the assumptions section to just sort of list, here are the things that we think we need to do in the 1, 3, and 5 year time frame and what we think they cost.
Well, I left the assumptions out of the capital assumptions out of my assumption budget because there was a separate narrative for the capital. So, but I mean, I can include
I
a
think
capital
you should.
section.
Is there some stuff that we can't not spend money on, like
Sure.
Your roof problem, or
The
excuse
valve.
me, the roof problem, the valve, right? So to basically have a separate capital section and not included in the 3 to 5 year budget is just not realistic.
Agreed.
Unless I'm wrong, tell me I'm wrong.
I agree. Like I said,
So I'm not talking about putting the whole wish list, and I realize this is a pared down wish list, but if there's category 1 stuff, and if we don't fix it, we're gonna have to fix it next year when, the pass is closed and everything's flooding.
What we'll do, I guess we'll bring this back through the respective committees that have a bite at this apple. So operations and planning would be the 2. And then those committees will respectively pare down their portions to must-have critical components, and then we'll put those into the budget and give Kelly a line item for that.
Yeah, and I think it should be in the narrative too, because some of us focus more on that and trust you to run the numbers.
So are you saying that I'm thinking back to last year, because wasn't it last year the first time you did the below the, yeah. So you're still going to do it below the item, below the line, I guess is what the terminology is. So you see it, but it really doesn't impact the income statement, because it's all balance sheet.
statement because it's capital.
Right.
But it does impact cash flow.
Yeah.
So that's
Okay.
the summary sheets used to not have that cash section at the bottom. Last year was the first year. Michael added all of that cash portion at the bottom. I just haven't got that far yet.
Oh, okay.
So that's why it wasn't included in this iteration of what you saw in the budget.
Yeah.
And I did not include any of the capital plan narrative in my budget assumptions because there was a separate capital plan narrative. I can absolutely put another section in there regarding what our capital plan must-haves that will be included in this portion of the budget. I honestly just hadn't got that far. We just hadn't got to the cash and capital portion of the budgeting process yet.
Okay, please do that, because I just, as a board member, community member, whatever, would like to know, we're going to spend some money to repair the roof, or we're going to
Right. And
spend
it
some
would have
money
been
to...
included in the next, when I got to that portion of the budget, but I just hadn't got there yet.
That was initiated because of our I&I, the capital and replacement component of that, and I think membranes too. So,
Just to give a scale, so when I was going through this in preparation for planning, I just added up all the 1s and 2 priorities for the 5 years, and it comes out to be about $1.85 million total cash. We should be able to handle that over 5 years. Should.
one thing that-
Since I'm not on planning or the other one that sees it, but I am on finance, I'd kind of like to have it in the
I
budget.
think you should. But I was just trying to give a sense of scale.
Yeah.
That,
$400,000 a year.
I was pleased to see that it was, that doesn't include a switch station. But all the other stuff, all the other 1s and 2s added up about $1.8 million for 5 years.
Wild card is the membrane replacement, which we're past the warranty period now, and we're hoping they're going to get 12, 15 years out of them, but we just don't know. So
Any more questions on the budget then? Randy, you're next.
Performance reporting. Starting with electric, for the month of March, we had a production of 973,000 kilowatt hours. Our unidentified losses were at 72,000 or 7% for the month. We're at 12% loss for the year. I do want to note that in March, we did find 2 additional commercial electric meters that were not wired correctly from the CTs to the meters. We are waiting on a report from Trimart. We did have them out for a day to repair these. We are anticipating bringing back before the board next month some potential back billing for the last 6 months for these 2 meters.
How did you discover it?
We have a load recorder, a separate metering device that we move around, and these were, one of them was on the snowmaking system, so this was an unusual occurrence that we got to capture in February. The other one was just a relatively low priority meter because of the low multiplier on the meter, but a significant undercharge happening there. So we'll have a report for you in at the next board meeting in May, and we would anticipate adding back in those build units. If we take a look at propane, for March, we had about 3.5 million cubic feet produced or delivered. We still have a negative loss for the month. We're at negative 5% for the month and for the year. I did take a look back. We have definitely seen a turnaround from negative territory that was larger than 5%. So I keep anticipating that's going to happen the warmer months of the year, coming up with low usage, so we shall see. In water, we had 1.8 million gallons produced from our wells. Our losses were 452,000 gallons, or 25%. I anticipate some of this was stored in the tanks, and we'll see that drop down in April. We are at 15% loss for water for the year. And then lastly, wastewater. We had treated 2.5 million gallons at the wastewater treatment plant in March. I&I was a little over 1 million gallons of that, or 44%. We did have one high rain snow event at the end of the month in March. April on this one's going to be much worse. For the year, we're at 32% loss in the wastewater department. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
I know this is kind of comparing apples and oranges, but is there any way to get a feeling for how well our work on infiltration has done? I know these are lower percentages than we were seeing last year, where they were in the 70s and 80s in the spring months, but just something so we can compare and find, is this work effective? I believe it is, but trying to quantify it in some form.
In addition to looking at just the monthly numbers, during our work this spring on I&I, we may be able to revisit areas where we saw the big problems and quantify how much we've reduced the I&I there. So maybe between the two of those we could get a feeling on how our projects are improving the situation. I'll make that as a note.
I don't want to put a lot of work out for nothing, but I think it'd be good to know how well we're doing if we can find some way of measuring that.
I think the fair comparison is springtime,
Yeah.
when you're just looking at melt, whereas these others are dependent on rain events that are unpredictable.
Thank you.
That's all I had for performance reporting.
And any question on the aquifer levels, or? Good?
Weeks, I mean, the average 125 for 4.5, I mean, I was starting to get used to the 160s, 170, 180 levels. Are we kind of assuming we'll get back up this summer, over the summer, I mean, during the spring runoff, or
I think so, yeah.
lower usage?
The lower usage, the aquifers recharge. And don't forget that we overdrafted those deeper aquifers because 2 was
Right.
offline for such a duration.
Right.
So they haven't had a chance to really bounce back. We've been using 2 once we were able to confirm non-detects.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to be a slower catch-up than you've seen in the past. Especially since March was such a heavy visitor
Yeah.
and water production usage comparatively. Everybody finally got a ski.
Okay, if no further questions on that, we'll move on to D, wastewater system feasibility study. Eric?
I wish Howard was here, and I've thanked him multiple times, but I just publicly want to make sure that everyone knows that Howard didn't have to do this, didn't have to provide this, didn't have to do a walkthrough with me. It's nice to have another civil engineer set of eyes, look at things, and he and I discussed this quite a bit, so I appreciate him taking the time to do this at no charge to the district. So that was very generous of him, and I really appreciate that. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to read through the report. I agree with the content of the report. I agree with the majority of the content, absolutely. In terms of prioritization of what I think is most important, that's where Howard and I differ a little bit, but overall, there's nothing in the report that I disagree with. And without Howard here to answer, are there any questions about his report maybe I can try and field an answer to?
So the capital plan is currently based on your expertise and Howard's expertise, and then this study will nail it down for us.
Right, and not to speak for Howard, but I'll speak for Howard. I think he would argue that the roof is more important than where I've placed the importance.
Yeah.
Although I think the roof is very important. You've heard my rationale. Howard's rationale is you got to get that fixed now to stop continued deterioration, which is a valid point. So, not to speak for him, but I think, I don't know, who was with us on the tour? Jeff, I think that reflects accurately his concerns.
I think Howard and I did talk about the roof, and we were both very positive on getting something done in the immediate sense to correct as much of the problem as we can, because it's a bad workplace. So, the roof needs a lot of work, but maybe some remedial work this year would help.
Maybe at a bare minimum, we white star the whole roof, clean it off, white star the whole thing, and at least try and get a membrane seal on it at a minimum. But Rick and I will work on getting a roofer out here and do that. So,
Eric,
yes, sir.
So the tour I did was, I think it was 2 years ago. For me, the biggest shock was how bad the indoor air quality was, and I didn't think about the ramifications of the rest. So I don't know how you think of that in terms of priority.
Right, so that goes back to the exhaust ducts in the basins there, and those have been offline 10 years? 10 years, never repaired, stayed offline. The problem is that also contributes to additional corrosion, and I think Howard touched on it too, but it contributes to additional corrosion within the plant itself. So I agree that that's a relatively cheap fix. It just needs to be done and budgeted for. So when we go through the critical things, when we go back to operations, and Peter and the operations committee and I sit down, that may be one of the items that we budget and then get back on the full budget list of absolutely critical must-have.
Okay.
But yes, that it's causing not only that issue of that, rancid air, but it's actually causing damage. So
when I spoke with Howard about this, he speculated that maybe it hadn't been repaired because it caused odors outside the plant, possibly, or because it brought cold air in and made the digesting processes less efficient. Was there a reason why they haven't been repaired?
The big blowers, I believe, were modified because of noise and odor. Not the ones inside the.
Right.
Yeah, not the ones inside the contact chambers, or not the contact chambers, the basins.
I was just wondering why weren't they repaired? Was there a reason that we should be aware of?
Access to the equipment itself is challenging for district staff, and then the cost of hiring an outside person to come in and do the work was something that's been shelved and pushed back for several years.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the first thing is the health and safety of the employees, I mean, honestly, and so I agree with Jeff's and Howard's assessment on that.
We'll definitely make sure and convey that to the operations committee too, so we make sure and prioritize that. Any other questions on Howard's report? Okay. All right then, moving on to the RFPs. The district solicited 6 engineering firms for proposals to prepare the feasibility study. We received 2, which is the number I actually thought we'd receive. We're just not a big enough fish in the pond for specialized, qualified firms who deal in this explicitly to bid on at the price range we have. So staff received the 2 RFPs. Staff reviewed them, and independently of looking at the cost proposals, and Stantec received a slightly higher rating, and the staff reviewing was myself, Rick, and Brandy. Received a slightly higher rating than Carollo. Upon opening the bids, Stantec was the lower of the 2 bids, and so staff recommends that they be considered the lowest responsive proposer, and that we execute a contract with them to begin the feasibility study. I will add that when I originally brought this to the board's attention that we should do this, the intent was to have the study so we could actually budget for whatever they come up with by June. Because of the month delay due to the passes being closed in the board meeting, that will not be feasible. However, I've already talked to both, assuming both consultants not knowing which one we're going to select, that we would like to see preliminary estimates that we could use for budgetary purposes in terms of planning out. So they were both amenable to providing those a little more detail than a rough estimate. Let's call it a 75% estimate of what they think the improvements would cost.
What's the time frame for doing the completed report?
My original time frame for them was 3 months.
Okay.
I was shooting to have it done by the end of June, and now we'll have it done by the end of July.
Okay.
Yeah. Barring anything unforeseen, of course. There is turnaround time on district staff's part, so we have a part to play in that, in the timing of that as well. But assuming everything can stay on time, 3 months.
Eric, didn't I notice in the budget that you're actually budgeting the payment over 2 years, though? So we'd be doing 30...
I actually budgeted all this fiscal year, but I split it between capacity and replacement.
Okay, maybe that's what I...
That's where there's 230,000 hits in there.
Okay.
You're right, though. I will need to go back and revise that and spread it across, because now it will go into July, which is next fiscal year. So I will make that correction. If we approve it.
Are you recommending?
Absolutely.
Any discussion?
Any questions from the public, or?
I think we've identified the need. So, and this is a little higher than we had planned.
Mhm.
We were talking something in about half this, but this is what it is. So do I hear a motion to approve the...
Proceed with the Stantec proposal.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Got
Thank
it.
you. We'll hit the ground running on that. Okay.
Okay.
As part of your kickoff with Stantec, I mean, I'm sure you'll do this in some fashion. But let them understand that we only have a certain budget. I mean, even over 5 years, we're only going to have a certain amount of money to spend probably.
I made that very clear in the proposal that I
Okay.
needed, and I'll reiterate that because it's a good point, especially for the public to understand. They are directed to look at phasing, a phased approach, so we can hit components and take time to do them as money becomes available. They're to identify grant and low interest loan options as part of their study. They actually have grant specialists. Both consultants have grant specialists on staff. And they are to analyze multiple options: rehabilitation, replacement, and I forget, there was one more into that. Oh, just a brand new plant. What would that be? Is that cheaper to buy a package plant? They were to look at all three of those options. Can we salvage anything out of there? If so, what can we salvage? Is it cost effective to salvage it? I was very detailed in what I expected from them, and
Good, thanks.
this is going to be a big apple to bite, and I really, really have to find the funding to make this happen. I know that's going to happen, and I'm very concerned about it.
Okay, any more questions on wastewater? Moving on to E, greenhouse gas auction profit allocation. Randy, back at the table.
Sir. For the California Air Resources Board cap and trade regulation, the district receives free allocations which, unless we use them for compliance, which we do not meet the compliance threshold, are required to be sold at auction. Our auction profits, which Kelly talked about earlier, have to be used exclusively for the benefit of retail ratepayers of the electric distribution utility. In talking with our consultants, we have a limited amount of acceptable uses. We can refund the money to ratepayers. We can purchase renewable energy equipment to provide electricity to ratepayers. We could establish some sort of loan fund so that ratepayers could purchase their own energy efficient upgrades or renewable equipment, or we could use the funds in other ways consistent with AB 32. So on the board here, you'll see just a summary of what we've received over the past few years, what we've spent it on. And what we want to focus on today are the 2 years, 2016 and 17, which are unspent. The total there is about $85,000. On a separate regulation, the district is required to comply with the California Renewables Portfolio Standard, which is RPS. We do that through purchasing renewable energy credits, or RECs. The most cost-effective way for us, well, we do that historically by purchasing RECs because that's the most cost-effective way to do that. We have a exemption that allows us to purchase the least costly bucket 3, category 3 RECs, and we will need to offset 33% of our retail sales for a compliance period ending in 2020. So the two of these are not directly related, but they are related in the sense that we must purchase these renewable energy credits in order to meet our compliance by 2020. If we do not use existing funds, such as these greenhouse gas profits, we would be forced to find other ways to pay for this, which might be a rate increase. So in 2016, what we had proposed was using the amount of money needed from the profit allocations and then refunding the rest to ratepayers. So what we have done is reached out to Shell on an estimate on how much these renewable energy credits would cost. Right now we're about $2 a renewable energy credit, which would be about $20,000 for the period 2017 to 20. What staff recommends,
What are the units in an energy credit?
one energy credit offsets 1 megawatt.
1 megawatt, okay. So it's $2 per megawatt is the offset?
Yes. So what staff recommends is that we take the $20,000 approximately from the 2016-2017 auction profits, which would leave approximately $65,000, which would be refunded to ratepayers in the balance. And I'm happy to answer any questions on this that the board or public might have.
Why didn't we take any action in 2016? Why did we just defer?
I don't know. We said that we were going to do this. We knew it was coming up.
Right.
We just did not, and we actually got a quote from Shell at the
Right.
time, which was
I
the
thought we
same.
had already,
Yeah.
all right.
We just haven't.
Didn't do it. Okay. And then, did we take these items as revenue and report them? So when we do a refund to ratepayers, there's an expense?
Well, basically, it just shows as it comes out of our revenues. It's not shown as a
It's a
direct
subtraction
rate. It's
from
a
revenues
subtraction
in
from
the month
revenues.
that we do it.
Which is what happened the last time when we gave that credit out. When we did the refund, I believe it was 2015 we did the refund. Yeah, it's shown on the customer's
Right,
electric
and
statement as a credit and
And we
comes
just
out of
do it
revenues.
proportional to
Kilowatt hours over the time period?
We
It was per
actually do
meter.
it per meter. We are not allowed to do
Oh, that's
it
right.
per kilowatt.
Right, that's right.
So we're refunding about 65,000. What would that be?
We have about 700 meters approximately.
Yeah, so that's quite a refund. So,
I think in 2000, the last time we did it, it was around $50.
Yeah,
So this is
yeah. Something closer to 7
as
meters.
much as I thought.
And the Finance Committee did review and approve this recommendation as well.
So my only, it's not really, yeah, I agree with that. And I asked this, I think, earlier, maybe in the planning, I can't remember where it was, but I don't quite understand why, I mean, we're not, to reach that 33%, because the way we purchase electricity, we have to kind of assume that none of that is renewable. Even though the Shell portfolio has a significant part of it as being renewable.
Somebody else already claimed it, the renewable portion of the power.
What he purchases just
Yeah, it's
power
ground
with
power.
with no renewable component.
It's hard to figure out, but okay.
The renewable portion was already sold to somebody else.
They split the two, the power and the renewable
Nice.
attributes.
But look, a credit to our customers is a good thing.
Yeah. So we have a recommendation from staff to approve the,
I move we use the funds to pay for our renewable energy credits and the remainder be refunded in one lump sum to customers.
I'll second that.
second by Peter. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
When would that happen, by the way?
Once we purchase the RECs, know the actual dollars, then we can process the balance. So we'll get on that, purchasing the RECs, when Brandy gets back from vacation. She gets to go on vacation, so we can't keep her, she has a flight to catch, so. I did. She deserves it.
I would think we could purchase them by the end of April and have it ready for the following billing statement, so May or June.
Yeah, I would also not keep it a secret. I mean, maybe credit it in June, talk about it in July, put it in the newsletter.
Absolutely.
And we did do a newsletter article the last time that we
Right.
did this.
Okay, very good. We'll move on to item 8F, purchasing policy. Eric?
The purchasing policy, as you can see by the attachment, had not been updated since 1986. It could be 1886, but I'm pretty sure it's 1986. And so there were some changes recommended And I apologize, I thought I put the red line version in here, and I did not. And I apologize. If anyone wants it, I can provide that. But this was reviewed by Finance. Basically, it just cleans up a few things, how we advertise, basically shows that we're going to comply in all our purchasing aspects with Public Contract Code and Government Code, which California Contract Code and Government Code, which provides all the appropriate statutes. There's no reason to repeat them in our ordinance if we just say we're going to follow them, which we have to follow them. The prior policy kind of regurgitated what was there then, but it was 86, so it was still changing, and it's ever changing, which is why if we adopt it as we will comply with them, any changes the state makes, we will be compliant with them ahead of time. It changes, it's the major changes here. Major budgeted one-time or annual purchases was increased from $4,000 to $25,000. That was one of the changes. And for both B and C. There was a new item added at D, which allows the assistant general manager and the assistant managers, in this case Brandy and Kelly, to authorize purchases, budgeted purchases, routine budgeted purchases up to $1,000 instead of them having to come through the general manager. And it didn't change anything on unbudgeted items. If it's an unbudgeted item, it comes before the board. So those are the main changes to the proposed policy. Any questions?
Just one question, on E, wouldn't you want to set kind of some threshold? Because if it's a $1,000 unbudgeted item, I really don't need to see it.
That's definitely something we can consider. There was some pushback on that, so.
Yeah, okay.
But if that's something the board wants to change, I'm sure you don't mean to bother
I
you.
feel leaderless at the moment, so why don't we just pass on that suggestion?
Talked about this in February, right?
Yeah, I can't remember what we said about
I'm
it.
having trouble remembering.
Yeah, it was February.
Maybe Nancy, you remember what we might have said about that?
Oh, look, I'd be fine with that. Purchases of supplies, materials, and services over $1,000.
Okay. So, okay, we can make that change, and if that's,
If you think about that, I'm kind of thinking this is dangerous. But if you think about that, so if every month for every department had $1,000, at what point would some decision like that have an impact on the budget?
I would just leave it for the general manager's discretion for items under $1,000 and trust them if it was aggregating up to. I mean, if we look at the list from just this year for the unbudgeted items, I don't know that all of those need to come back
right,
for approval.
that's fair. And I think, when I say non-budgeted items, there's operational budget available for operational expenses that don't fall into this category.
Right.
So repairing the centrifuge, I took that out of operations because that's an operational item. There'd be a very narrow window that would be an unbudgeted item. It would be something that's not operational and wasn't captured in capital. So it'd be a rarity. Corey's contract would be an example of an unbudgeted item that wasn't captured anywhere. That would be a good example of an unbudgeted item, and which Kelly's been reporting on, and so the board's been made aware of it. So I think there's maybe your example of it. So, and hopefully you've seen by the budget that I'm very, very conservative. I don't want to spend any money.
Let me offer to retract my suggestion.
Okay.
So I move we approve policy statement 310.
Moved and seconded by Peter. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Just let me ask the board here, it's going to be a long meeting. Do you want to take a break at any point? Everyone comfortable? Or?
So far.
I could use a
This
this
is-
break.
Okay,
Maybe take a 5-minute stretch.
Yeah, why don't we do that now?
Finishes in my
standards, this is not a long meeting.
Thank you for that, Eric. Oh, for the committee chairs, I'll tell. I'm going to be sending you general manager objectives to review.
I'll think of the snow on the roads, but then there.
Oh, and within River Lake, it's going really fast after that rain.
Very good. We'll call the meeting back to order. Recess is over. And we're on item 8G, SB 623. And Eric, will you lead this?
Yes, this is, we're a member agency of Association of California Water Agencies, ACWA, and they have requested that all of their member districts sign a letter opposed unless amended relative to SB 623, which would tax drinking water. And there's a lot of information in here, so, and this is just a request from ACWA, so we put it on the agenda. And it's up to the board to decide whether they want to support this or oppose it.
I'd like to state why I'm opposed to their suggestion as a starting point. So first off, if you look at SB 623, it passed the Senate 39-1. So, and these are people whose job it is to look at this and assess what's the best way to pay for these things. So I don't want to second, when the Senate is practically unanimous, and the one was a not voter, somebody was not there. So it passed unanimously out of the state Senate. So I think that's a very strong indication that it's a thoughtful proposal. It's passed 11-0 in Assembly appropriations once it moved from the Senate to the Assembly. So I think in this particular case, the agency just says, well, I'd rather not be taxed. I think the alternative they came up with is unrealistic. So I don't think we should be weighing in on, I think we should either not weigh in or disagree with them.
Am I correct in saying, when I read through this, first of all, didn't know if it was too late or not, because these hearings were in March 14th and March 15th that they referred to.
It's not too late because it hasn't been voted on yet.
I see.
And
But
the hearings did not have a vote. The last vote was in September.
Okay. So was the core of their concern not necessarily this fee, but that would lead, I mean, I think here it said it would lead to water, could lead to water, a tax on water. Is that what it's saying, or is this the tax on?
It is a tax on water. It's a tax on drinking water, not all water. So fire flow and non-potable uses, I believe, are exempted. If I'm not, for meters that are dedicated specifically to that.
Yeah, I mean, I read it and I just sort of was sitting there just very neutral about it. I didn't know what to think, so.
Well, philosophically, I have a problem with taxing drinking water.
So what?
Things like food. But I also agree with Bob. I think this is a done deal. And we can register our objection. I don't know about the feasibility of what they're proposing. It seems a little convoluted, but, you know, I'm personally against taxing drinking water, but it's just my opinion on it.
So this is another thing that we're going to have, if it isn't, if it stands, we're going to have to tax people on their water bills. We're going to have to measure their drinking water.
I assume we would.
That's going to create, sounds like another headache to me. I don't know.
How do you distinguish between drinking water and shower water, like if you're taking a shower?
You don't.
It's potable water.
Keep your mouth
You
closed.
could have been.
That's been my statistic all these years.
It sounds like a nightmare to me. I don't know. But it's probably too late.
It's not too late.
No, it's not too late.
I talked to...
Definitely not too late.
Bob said it's still winding through, and the Aqua rep called and asked if we had taken action. I informed him about the snow, and he said, well, we still would appreciate it, so I'm just bringing it forward.
They would, the bill proposes 95 cents per month for water meters up to 1 inch. So that's what it would impose.
What's the tax money going to be spent on?
It's spent on the fact that there are people in the Central Valley, for example, that have no access to clean drinking water. And so it funds the priority needs for water, for drinking water within the state.
It actually goes, if I'm not mistaken, I think it actually goes to general fund with the
But
purpose.
But
once it goes to general fund, there's
it's
no
in a
guarantee
special
where it goes.
fund. It's collected by general fund, and it's in a special fund for that use.
Is it?
It exempts low
Yeah,
income.
I think I read that, what Bob was stating. It is a segregated fund.
Yeah.
Does it go on in perpetuity?
Yes.
Yeah, once
Yeah.
it, and it'll probably be increased over time.
Have you ever seen a tax go away?
Yeah.
Or go get lower?
Oh, it's like our meter tax, though, our meter fee was going to go away, not going away.
Yeah, it would generate about $100 million a year. So my recommendation is we just not send in an oppose letter. Oppose unless amended letter. I mean, the general strategy for this is it probably won't pass as SB 623. Like they said, they'll put it as part of the budget trailer bills. Because it requires a 2/3 vote. Well, the state comes up with a general budget, and that's approved by June 15th, or nobody gets paid in the building. So that seems to be an effective strategy. And that's a majority vote. But then the implementation is done by a series of they're called trailer bills, of how the budget's actually implemented. So you think the first one is you're appropriating, and the second is the implementation of it. So those are put together as bundles of things. And so it probably, just from a strategy viewpoint, they'll probably pass it as a trailer. They'll probably try to pass it as a trailer bill. But it's the same contents as what's in 623.
Oh, here's a sentence I was looking at. The Agricultural Water Agency members have joined the coalition, express their concern that if the proposed tax is enacted, it would serve as a precedent for future taxes on water. So I guess additional taxes is what they're saying. Okay. Yeah, I don't know.
So there's 300 drinking water systems in disadvantaged communities that currently do not have safe drinking water. So that's what it's trying to target.
Bear in mind, this would come out of our revenue. We have to do a 218 if we wanted to raise rates to accommodate this
Yeah, we
additional
would.
tax.
We would raise rates to add the tax.
Wouldn't it be handled just the same way like our, we already have a use an electric surcharge that comes from the state that is put, as a separate line item.
No, we have to collect this and then give it to the state.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
have to collect
we would have
that
a separate
surcharge
line.
too.
Oh.
Yeah, it's on our
Yeah.
bill as a separate line item.
We would have a separate line item.
And that would be, and then I would have to do a return to the state each year, just like or each quarter, just like I do for the electric surcharge return.
Yeah, and to add it to the rates, we would do a 218.
We really would have to do a 218 to add it.
Yes.
But I'm opposed to the letter of opposition. I
Would-
don't want to do that.
I mean, if the state is requiring us
Doesn't matter.
to do it,
Doesn't matter.
how could we oppose it?
You
We're
would have
talking
to
about-
take it out of our funds until such time as we did the 218 process.
Well,
I went through this on wastewater.
Yeah.
And they did,
It'd be-
the regional board levied it.
It'd be an expense item that you might choose to include in the rates as a line item.
Well, in the spirit that reasonable people can disagree, I would be in favor of signing this, because I just don't think a tax on water is a good idea.
yeah, I mean, I was neutral until what you just told me. I mean, I don't think that the people doing the Senate is going to realize what it would take for a small agency like ours to implement it.
Take very little.
Well, the 218 process.
We don't have to do that.
What do you mean we don't have to?
We
do
could
it?
just have an additional dollar expense per meter.
Is that per year?
Those per month, not
Per month.
Per month.
I think it's per month.
And it varies on meter size for some of the
Yeah,
those
but
meters,
most
it'd
of
be
our-
$10 a meter for some of the
Yeah,
bigger
but
ones.
most of our customers are 1 inch or less.
Or, yeah, 3/4,
Yeah.
That's that's quite a bit of money.
Well, that's $100 million.
No, I mean,
Oh.
that we would lose in revenue.
Be about $11 a year.
Well, 700 meters, assuming they aren't all, but assuming they're,
700 times
yeah,
12.
yeah.
We don't have 700 water meters.
We don't.
I thought you said we had 700 connections, we were doing that before.
That was electric.
Oh. How many water meters do we have?
We have more?
We have 630, sorry.
Yeah, I just.
What's the cost per meter, per year?
Just
so
call
it'd
it
be
$1, so
$12
$630
per meter per year.
times 630.
$7,000 hit.
75-ish.
Our rates are already too high.
Yeah, I hate to add anything else to our rates that we can avoid.
Yeah.
Well, do I hear a motion one way or another here?
Yeah, I would move that we that we agree with Aqua in opposing this bill that's been passed.
It hasn't been passed.
Well, it's been proposed to be passed.
Okay, and that would be to sign this sample letter to this effect and
Yes.
send it off. Do I hear a second?
Second that.
Okay, moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 3-2.
I'm opposed.
I'm an aye.
Aye.
3 ayes, or 4 ayes,
We're supportive.
and Bob's opposed. So if you'll prepare that letter, we'll
Will do.
maybe a futile gesture, but... Okay, moving on to 8H, Melrose Escrow. Eric?
Yeah, this is just really ends up being a ministerial issue. Per the contract that the district signed, we're required to release some of the escrow money in certain conditions. Essentially, we need to release $426,800.20 from the escrow account. Or the release amount needs to be $48,011.12. So this is based on undeveloped property. So this is it goes goes back to the original agreement. So it's really ministerial. We're required contractually to do it.
Who are we releasing it to?
Kirkwood Capital Partners.
Yeah, the developer.
So this is all in compliance with our agreement?
That's correct. But the board could oppose it and not do it. That's the only reason I'm bringing it forward.
On what basis would we oppose it?
Well, we'd be defaulting on our contract, and we'd have to find some justification for that.
Thank you for that clarification.
I'm just
seems
saying,
like a tough one. I'm
let
not
me
sure.
rephrase. Along the way around the barn, it's not within my authority to release this money. I need board action to release the money.
Second.
Discussion.
Any discussion? Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, 8I, electric operation and maintenance review. Randy?
As an RUS borrower, we're required to conduct a periodic review of our operations and maintenance of the electrical system to comply with our policy. Once we've completed this review, the O&M review has to be reviewed by the Board of Directors. So what you have before you in your packet is the Form 300 Operations and Maintenance Review, which is basically a self-evaluation of how we're doing on all of the different items here that you'll see for electricity. Anything that is rated a 1 or a 0 is then required to be reported to us on what we're going to do about it. So I bring this before you, and I'll just focus on the things that are in the follow-up necessary steps. And if you take a look at page 1 of the Form 300, on Part 2, number 11, our spill prevention, containment, and control plan needs corrective action. So when we finished, we have an SPCC plan that covers everything in the valley. We do not have an SPCC plan that covers the additional infrastructure for the Out Valley project. The reason behind that is because if a switch station were to be built, we would have additional components. So our plan was to do this all at one time. We will be updating that based on the resolution of the switch station project. And that is what I will report to RUS on this one. It is in the works. And GeoCon did our last SPCC plan, so we anticipate going back to them. Other than that, the emergency restoration plan on item 7 of the same section is listed as a 1. That was because we are required to do an annual tabletop exercise. We had not been aware that that was an annual requirement. We were made aware of that. We did complete one this year, and we will complete them annually going forward. The only other 2 items on here that are rated a 0, the avian protection plan and the energy efficiency and conservation program, are both optional measures we do not have in place but are not required at this time. And so those do not require any additional action on our part. If there are any comments or questions on this, I'd be happy
The
to.
twos say see attached recommendations. And so you have a couple of twos here, but I didn't see any.
So the attached recommendation, this was quite the lengthy form. I've given you the short
okay.
version. The attached recommendations are governmental guidelines that we should shoot for on the twos. So for things like settlement conditions for our transformers, we do annually inspect those and repair them as necessary. So basically, we are striving to meet the government guidelines for recommendations on the ones that are labeled 2.
Okay, and does the spill prevention include up by Caples Lake, the problem there?
It does not. We have talked with Geocon about including that in the next iteration, but it currently does not. It's specifically in the valley here.
So, Randy, on the settlement, you say the inspection, so if we're doing that, why'd we get a 2?
The question, and some of the questions were, yeah,
Each one of these components probably had somewhere between 10 to 40 questions behind it. So 6A would have 10 to 40 questions behind it that you had to answer that ultimately gave you your rating. So there were multiple components behind each one of these. I don't know if you remember which settlement pushed us to a 2, but I'm sure there was something, probably using a geotechnical engineer to evaluate that made it into that. So, but we can share that with the board. The spreadsheet is.
Well, I don't necessarily need to see the spreadsheet. I'm just interested, are we doing what we can to get it up to a 3, or is it necessary to get it up to a 3?
In this case, I think all we need to do is what we're doing, which is evaluate periodically and fix the problems. On this one, I think the question that actually dropped it down to a 2 was incidents of settling and erosion around pad-mounted conditions exist. And they do, and they always do. Every summer we find new ones. So I think just the fact that it's an ongoing maintenance program for us is all we need in this case.
And the action that we're required to take here?
We don't actually, we just needed you to review it as a board. We don't need an approval necessarily, so if there's any comments, I can incorporate those, but other than that, your review is sufficient.
Any other comments, discussion?
One thing I would add to that is the tabletop exercise. I think Bob would have thoroughly enjoyed it. The scenario was anti-corporate terrorists, anti-veil terrorists got into the powerhouse, broke in, and screwed up all our PLC programming, then locked everything off, and it was well thought out, and it was a really good tabletop exercise. So I want to commend Brandy on doing a heck of a job. It was entertaining and thought-provoking, so everybody really took it seriously. So she did a great job.
Before April 8th or after April 8th?
That was before April 8th.
The break-in, I mean.
Yeah,
Oh.
in this scenario, it was right before Christmas.
Oh, yeah.
Of course. Okay, we'll let the minutes reflect that we have reviewed and evaluated. Thank you, Brandy. Moving on to 8J, Communications Policy. This is on here because there's been some discussion lately that I think and in doing a little research, we don't currently have a communications policy. And this could be wide-ranging, or it could be a more narrow. Initially, I was thinking of something that was more of a narrow policy, just how we treat letters and things we get in and respond to them and things like that. But communications policy could be quite more elaborate than that. So my feeling is we need one. If nothing else, just for the basic policy of when we get a communication from anybody and our customers, or what do we do with that communication? And my own feeling and my past experience is that whenever possible, we acknowledge receipt, even if we're not immediately prepared to give an answer. I think all communications need at least an acknowledgement that we've received them. And then what we do with the letters and things afterwards, whether the board, one of the things I did when I was managing is I had a read file. That if the board was interested in what the responses were to letters rather than having them in a packet because they can get cumbersome, is there's a read file that's just maintained with the correspondence and the answers and things. You can have one for the public and one for the private and confidential. That's just a suggestion, but my hope would be that Eric take the reins here and we come up with a draft communications policy that work for us that would cover those things that we feel we need to cover and bring that back to us at some point.
Yeah, I think that what you just said is a good idea. I mean, I just think that it's important that if the communication is about a district policy or a district procedure or thoughts on those kinds of things, not about I need somebody to come out and look at my propane meter or anything like that, but I'm talking about policy, procedure, those kinds of things, that all the board members should be aware, or should be allowed to be aware of it if it's in a read file, like a folder on Box or something like that.
Or criticism of performance.
Or criticism, yeah.
Just
those kinds of things, just so we're all aware of it. And I also think that if one of us gets a communication that, we should send it to the appropriate committee chairperson and, of course, the general manager, just so that some action can be taken on it if it's something that needs to be answered. It's a little more complex than just a simple clarification.
And another aspect of this is who's authorized to speak for the district and in what circumstances and things like that. So,
What's a read file? Is that like a box with papers in it?
well, the way I always made, and this is before
A while ago.
we've got, yeah, and I agree that we should be too long ago, but I agree that we should be trying to eliminate paperwork. But what I found handy is just may not be on a monthly basis here, but I just maintained a monthly file of all correspondence, and I got a lot of correspondence where I was before. So, and it was just open. The public file is pretty much open to anyone that wants to come in and read it. If a customer or residents are interested in what's going on, they could do it. The private and confidential is just for the board, but it gives you the opportunity to look at what's happened in the past month and what we've received and what we've put out. And again, it's rather than trying to include these things under a correspondence item on the agenda where you have a packet of letters and correspondence. So,
Yeah, I would, first of all, I'm not opposed to a policy. Second of all, I guess I play devil's advocate in two areas. One, I look at a board as sort of an oversight organization, not a management organization. And so I'd kind of like to thrust the responsibility back on staff. We call it staff, number one. Number two, it seems in this community that if staff communicates something that the person writing in doesn't like, we often hear about it in sort of an automatic way. So I'm just leery of creating more bureaucracy, I guess is what I'm saying.
yeah, and again, I was just offering those as a suggestion. I don't know. I'm sure other districts have policies that we can look at and borrow from and come up with something that works for us. But right now, we don't have a policy.
Sure.
So if we're all in agreement.
Yeah, I just think it should be as lightweight as possible.
Yeah.
But just assuring acknowledgement, also setting expectations about when the writer of the communication is going to get an answer. And the acknowledgement might say it's been forwarded to the general manager or forwarded to the committee chair or whatever, just so they know it's going to be handled. There may not be an answer right away, but it's going to be handled.
The only other thing I would add to that, and I know we've brushed on this before, but it's really hit more home. RUS requires us to put a tagline on all of our emails. We've since adopted it through our KMPUD.com. The problem is when board members use their personal emails, that tagline puts us out of compliance. Also, personal emails are disclosable under the CPRA, so in order for staff to be able to have a handle and be able to disclose documents should be required. I would request that the board only use their KMPUD for communicating KMPUD business. It's been hit or miss. Definitely been improving, but every so often I get an oddball one that goes to someone's Gmail account or their personal business account. And we need to steer away from that. And if you do receive one on there, you just need to forward it to your KMPUD and respond from that one. Just that way it gets in our servers, and that way staff can comply with the Public Records Act if it ever comes forward. But
Terry, does Alpine County have anything like this? Communication policy? Or?
Well, it's a disclosure thing. Yeah, we're supposed to only respond, everybody's supposed to respond with their county email.
So is there a policy? Do you have
Yes,
a standard way of responding or a standard process?
there is a policy that you're supposed to follow.
So maybe you could share that.
Yeah, no, I'll definitely
Yeah.
I'll definitely borrow, beg, and steal and see if I can come up with something.
Any other discussion on that item? Ball's in your court, Eric.
Great.
Bring that back to us.
I can do that.
Good point. So we'll move on to item number 9, General Manager Report.
Just a few updates on things that we've been tracking, and obviously hoping for continued movement, but unfortunately it's not been seen that. Starting with the employee housing ordinance, I've been working with both Vail and KVD trying to craft something that's mutually agreeable to the district and hopefully to the residents in terms of any changes that would be proposed before TriTac and ultimately the respective counties. It has been lost with Vail legal for 2 months now, and I've seen nothing on it, but I just did want to update you that there it sits. And so I guess that's all I really have to say about that. School site, there was some movement on the school site discussion about a land swap and potential parking. It dovetails into Vail's ultimate parking plan, which is R.O. Anderson, dovetails into our ultimate expansion of employee housing, what's suitable, what's not. Again, kicked back into Vail's court and has sat there for 2 months with no movement. In this case, KVD is very interested in moving forward because they're under an obligation to provide parking to Vail, and they provided these solutions, and Vail won't respond to them as to which solution they want. The district's position is that we don't want to allow Vail to use our property to develop their parking plan unless there is a definitive property swap with all the proper zoning on it, because the school site doesn't have the proper zoning at this time such that we could use it, and that there's adequate compensation to the district should any of those plans go forward. Again, no movement in the last 2 months.
Yeah, I just noted that the TriTac meeting, which was supposed to have been yesterday and was rescheduled for next Friday, they've got a line item there about a discussion about parking and
I saw that.
traffic. But I have no idea what it
And there's
is.
no attachments with that, if you notice that as well.
Also storm drains, so I don't know.
I saw that with no attachments, and unfortunately, I am in San Francisco that day all day, so Rick will be handling that for me. We've been going over what we want to talk about on that. So, without attachments, I don't know what the general and Brendan's new, and he apologized profusely for the last minute notice after we were told it was canceled, and then he swapped it. He did apologize. He's new at El Dorado County, and he's new at dealing with this. So. And his wife was ill, so for all those reasons, we cut him a little slack, and we'll host it here. We're able to get them in Friday to use our facilities for the meeting. We had no conflicts on that. So,
Eric, could you make a contact with Vail and see if you can get what they're going to packet, what
Sure.
they intend? So
yeah,
we might,
Yeah, I don't even know who.
I don't know who proposed it either.
Who
Yeah,
even was behind it. It might be the county saying we just don't want one of the counties, or we don't want the traffic backing up on 98 anymore, or I don't know.
yeah. Okay, yeah, I will definitely do that. Let's see. The RUSC 8 loan was submitted, and we've been providing additional information and clarifications as requested. So it's in Washington now. It's actually moved beyond the regional office, so that was quicker than we had thought it would do. So that's helpful and makes me optimistic for a faster turnaround.
On that note, can you maybe work with Howard now that we're on file to see if we can accelerate approval? It's, in the last 2 loans we've done with them, it's an enormous amount of work, as you know, Kelly knows, everybody in the district knows, to, prepare the thing. But once it's submitted, in the past, we're a small borrower, we're current,
Yeah.
in terms of all our covenants. We've done this twice before. It'd be great if we could get it approved before the July meetings.
Our-
I can definitely let you know that that is Howard's main goal in life at this point is to get this done as quickly as possible. And in our favor, being that this is a reimbursement loan, it doesn't have to go through the same approval process as the other 2 loans. We've already been approved for, all of our environmental studies and work plans and all of that. It's being based off of those work plans that are already in place. So I feel like this is definitely something that's on Howard's radar. He's wanting to get it done as quickly as possible and has pushed us along that route for the duration of this.
And Rodney Peach, when we were on a conference call with Howard, Kelly, and I, he acknowledged our need to accelerate this, and he had promised at that time to do everything he could to make it go faster. And with the quickness it got to Washington, I would say he's fulfilling that.
And the other one's line up with people responsible for documentation, which I think is that Nancy, somebody up in Washington who does a loan documentation. Because we should be able to accelerate that too.
Yeah.
3 months is a lot of paper pushing.
Just a quick update. There is some nosing around. Tesla's on hold still, but they promised that they're still going to come back at some point. There's some issue with proprietary. I believe that was the issue. Was that it was some Vail Corporate had an agreement with someone else such that Tesla couldn't brand it a certain way. Anyway, it's being worked again. Stuck with Vail Legal. You're sensing a theme here. But there is another developer that has started nosing around for a 40-unit hotel in the front on the highway. So Brandy's been working with them and providing them information. And this, without commentary, you guys can chuckle all you want, he says he can come in and get it built in a season. I said without chuckling. You have to look at it. Yeah.
This is another prefab.
Oh, yeah.
Over the last 40 years.
Yeah. The only other thing that I forgot to put on the slide, just an update for the board, is that the NOIA issue is continuing in discovery at this point with our insurance company's counsel, and that's where that sits. Staff has been providing documentation, and that's where that sits at this point. Any other questions for me? It's just been RUS and budget.
Okay.
PG&E for good measure. Just throw them in there now and again.
Any other questions for the general manager? We'll move on to the operations report. Rick?
Morning.
That's still one.
Yep, still doing good there. We're going to slow down right now. So I'm going to cover a couple items that were for March and then, of course, for April. Pleased to announce that the lease-to-own 950 is here, and you'll see it actually in the parking lot out front. Staff has already put over 100 hours on that piece of equipment, and very pleased with the way it performs. And we'll continue to take a look at our operations and determine whether we want to actually purchase the machine next year. But so far, so good. We did have it insured through our insurance company. We didn't take the option to have it insured through Holt of California, so we're good to go. Something else that happened in March is the ISO representative came out to do an evaluation of our fire department, our infrastructure, our water supply system. And the ISO collects information on municipalities' fire protection efforts in the communities throughout the United States. And each of these communities, ISO analyzes relevant data using our fire suppression rating schedule, or FSRS, as you know, which is a 4. This public protection classification typically is from 1 to 10, and we're better than most rural areas by maintaining the 4, and our hope is to continue to maintain the 4. General impression from the inspector is that their cycle process hasn't changed that much. What they look at hasn't changed that much. We get good ratings on our communications, our water supply, the infrastructure, but they definitely look at training, and they definitely look at the buildings and whether we can supply adequate fire suppression needs for high rises. So as you see in the capital budget, there's a ladder truck of 110 feet. You know, that's one of those things that ISO is looking for, but we've gotten around it by supplementing the need for that by making sure that everything gets built with sprinkler systems, and that our mutual aid is in place with outside agencies that have the resources. So long story short, we should receive a report back, or an initial letter back, actually 3 letters back to the general manager, because we live in 3 different counties, that hopefully will say your scores have reached a high enough level where you're going to maintain a 4, and away we go. But if they find that we come up short, then they'll assign us to a special officer or agent who will help us try to find extra points to either maintain the 4 and move on. And we had to do this last time as well. We didn't hit the mark, but we were able to get it. And in years past, we've been asked, oh, well, how close are you to a 3? Can you drop it down even lower? The reality is there's no way we could do that. There's so much that we'd have to have. That'd be full-time paid staff, again, the ladder truck, and then we could probably hit the 3rd rating, but at this point, I don't think we'll ever hit it. I just want to keep the 4.
What's the status of the mutual aid agreements?
It's been kind of, I don't want to say dropped off. It's not important to the counties right now, and we've been talking to both Eastern Alpine County and Amador counties, and we're going to have to probably bring back another meeting to...
Why isn't it important to them?
Just getting through the winter operations. There was discussion of having a tri-county mutual aid, and talking with both chiefs, they probably wouldn't sign a tri-county mutual aid agreement with us. So it's just something that's on my list of things to do, is to get back and get the mutual aid agreement signed. But that's kind of where it is right now.
Well, if there's not a mutual aid agreement signed, then what happens?
We continue running off the last 2, the one from 86 and the one from 2004, 2003.
Yeah.
We had those, and that's how we've been operating, is off of those.
So,
Well, I got invited to an economic development committee meeting on May 11th. Is that a forum where you should raise this?
probably not. This is going to be basically all the chiefs in one room saying, okay, let's move forward, let's go ahead and sign this. That's probably the right format in that meeting. But we'll continue on, and we'll definitely get it done. Any other questions about ISO or fire department in general? Okay. We also had a unscheduled power outage on Friday, March 2nd. This was due to a winter storm, and PG&E's line tripped. I never heard what the cause was. Brandy, did you? They never really gave us a reason. It wasn't a tree. It tripped their line. Unfortunately, it tripped our breakers, and we weren't able to reset the breaker at KM Green without physically going down to KM Green to do the work. Thanks to Brandy and her crew to get the reserve generators working here in the district, in the valley. Also during that time, we did have a small ammonia leak on one of our pumps, which was resolved. But the next day, within 24 hours, Ed Benson and I made the trek to KM Green from Bear River Reservoir. And this is a picture of the access road, or Spur 19, which goes over the mountain around to the substation. If it were not for Cedar Post and Dave Post, former Kirkwood snow removal employees, who just happened to be there on snowmobiles breaking trail, I don't know if Ed and I would have ever made it out. We got that machine stuck approximately 6 times, heavy, light snow, and maybe Terry Woodrow can comment, because I know you guys got hit with it as well. The conditions were in a way that unless you were full throttle, leaning back and trying to get through the snow, you would get stuck. And if you got stuck, you'd have to use that device up there, a come-along essentially, just to try to get the machine out. And it was a long day, but a successful day. We were able to restore the power, close the breaker, restore the power. I think it was like 8 o'clock that night by the time we got back up the hill. But again, it just stressed the needs of, getting better equipment and or developing a good relationship with outside agencies like Alpine County Search and Rescue or Amador County Search and Rescue. If we ever need to get out there again in these type of conditions, that we could call somebody and get there. But special thanks to Cedar and Dave Post. Again, if they weren't there, we'd probably still be walking. And then moving on to April. As you know, last Friday, there was an atmospheric river that hit the state of California. We were anticipating heavy rains and of course, a lot of moisture associated with this, rain on snow. So we did everything that we could in-house to prepare for it. We ensured all our emergency storage basins were empty. We fortified the East Lift. As you know, we've had issues with the East Lift flooding. And staff, again, did everything they could to prepare for this event. Unfortunately, we did have a Category 1 spill near our main lift. Essentially, the flows were so heavy that our 2 main lift pumps weren't able to handle the volume water coming into the plant. The estimate from NOAA as well as staff and others is we received 5 to 8 inches of rains over a 14-hour period, and the influent flow was 383,000 gallons on Friday and 430,000 gallons on Saturday. This exhausted our 300,000 plus gallons of emergency storage by 9 a.m. Thanks to the wastewater superintendent, Derek Dornberg, who spent pretty much all night at the wastewater treatment plant trying to keep up with the flows and preparing to do what we call bypass pumping, where we move water from our main equalization basin into the chlorine contact basin, which is just another step of getting water out. It's bypassing the membranes. Technically, it's allowed under our wastewater discharge permit. That's like the second to last resort, and then the last resort is when you spill, you spill. So we did everything we could, including hiring or calling Mark Frederick with Frederick Pumps, who, as you know, installed our 10 horsepower effluent pumps to ensure that we were getting water out of the treatment plant as quickly as possible. And Mark did come up and actually helped us mitigate some issues and increase the volume out of the plant. We were able to get about 600 gallons per minute out of the plant. But even with all these measures, staff, unfortunately we spilled and we had it reported to the state, which we have, and we fully expect we'll get a notice of violation from the state for this spill. This is an unusual occurrence. This next picture is actually the manhole that's behind the chemical feed facility, well 3, and as you can see, maybe not from where you're sitting, but basically we had water running over manholes. I've never seen this before, and I think this is to the conditions of, again, rain on snow, but also the Vail's operations with snow removal. They create, a beautiful grooming track for cross-country skiing, but that creates dams, ice dams, that diverts water in directions that we've never seen before. And so we did mitigation measures on manholes like this, sandbagging to try to divert and dike the water away from the manhole lids. But I'm sure we had penetration through this manhole. And other areas within the valley, and again, as Eric identified earlier, with 11 different areas that we'd like to basically bring the manholes up. We had standing water. You can see these snow stakes here, but there's about 18 inches of heavy, wet water and then ice and snow underneath that. I'm sure there was penetration there. This next picture is manhole 99 that we did do work on last summer, and I'm sure, and that's over between the two trees, but basically standing water. So something we'll definitely address this summer. Here's the east lift and the diking that we did. We built a sand diversion as well as a separate pump set up, and just fine at the east lift. But we are going to take a look at the east lift this summer and try to do some mitigation measures there that Greg McManus has suggested in one of the committee meetings. Of course, this is a major spill, and I did talk to Tom Fortune with Vail Resorts during the event because the rain subsided and also the spill subsided at approximately 10:15. We didn't feel that we needed to take an extra contingency plan with the resort, i.e. shutting the resort down. That was a day where the resort was actually already shut down. I think we had just Chair 5 running by midday, but thank goodness the masses weren't here. Unfortunately, it doesn't help our revenue for electric and propane and all the other services, but in this particular case, it definitely helped the wastewater treatment plant because between 9 and 1 o'clock, we had a huge hit, but things subsided and it slowly dropped off. And we continue to, as of right now, do necessary cleanups. We've actually bucketed out the snow around the area. We've moved that into our chlorine contact basin to capture any of the debris, and we'll continue to work with the state on the cleanup. But again, a very unusual event. A lot of us, people that have worked and lived up here, have never seen this before. This is actually Chair 1 on that day, and it was a running stream through Chair 1. And then if you were traveling east on 88 and saw Hope Valley, I've never seen so much water in Hope Valley. It looked like a lake. And even in last year's atmospheric rivers, we just never seen that much volume of water all at one time. So actually yesterday, we had an after-action review of the incident for district staff, and we're going to recreate emergency plans, SOPs for staff to ensure that we can do everything in the future if this happens again to make sure we don't spill. So that concludes my report, and happy to answer any questions from the board.
In the, I know any spill is bad, but is there a spectrum of badness? And where does this fall?
So certain things work in our favor here. One, this isn't a regularly recurring issue. Two, we can say that we can document the amount of rainfall, which was more than a 200-year event in that time frame. Three, we reported it immediately to the state, no delays, immediately to the state. We also did some additional testing that wasn't required by our SSMP, but I had staff take total coliform and fecal coliform tests during the event, so upstream of the manhole that was spilling and downstream of the manhole that was spilling. I also had them do that. Thursday was the follow-up. We did a second set of tests after the event had subsided. So we actually have documentation of the presence of bacteria and in what quantities during the event and after the event. I will know that there was total coliform and fecal coliform upstream of our manhole. So it's coming from somewhere else too. So there is an existing, but it was significantly higher after our spill. That's been reported to the state as well. I think we finished our report Friday to the state. And it's about 50,000 gallons. So again, a small amount comparatively.
That's what I was wondering, is that a
comparatively. So the state has two options essentially here. One is an NOV with no enforcement action. Two is an NOV with enforcement action. If they do an enforcement action, then it goes into two other options. One, there's a fine associated, and how much that is it $1 a gallon? Is it $10 a gallon? They have discretion. There's literally no rules for the regional board on their fines. It's ungodly what power they have, but they can do that. If they do fine us, then we fall into either a fine in lieu, so we could do abatement, we could do repairs, so talking about raising those manholes, that construction could mitigate the need for paying the fine, whatever that fine might be, if there is a fine. So we won't know until we receive from the state our notice of violation what they're going to do to us. Worst case in my mind would be a fine that could be mitigated through capital improvements, which we are already planning to do, so in essence it would be a wash in that scenario.
Does an event like this open any doors for grants to pay for some of these things?
Well, let me answer that in two parts. Since there was no emergency declared, we can't qualify for OES or FEMA money. However, if we have NOVs on file and we apply for grants or state revolving fund, our chances of succeeding are higher. And if we apply for loans, the portion that may be grants is higher. So that in a horrible way it could help us receive more funding.
Thanks.
Any questions on that?
Well, I think from reading all the reports, I think we did what we could do in preparation for this. And Mother Nature throws
Yeah, so thank you.
bad things at us
To you, Rick, and
sometimes.
staff, getting out there and doing what you could do.
And of course, Rick forgot to mention that Friday when all the poop hit the fan, pun intended, was Derek's birthday. So he spent his birthday doing this.
Happy
So
birthday,
poor
Derek.
fella.
Yeah.
You know, on the raising the manhole thing, is it worth looking at a scenario where instead of 4 feet in 11 to 18 places through the meadow that everybody hikes by during the summer, that there's a seasonal solution where, just a 2 to 4 foot high thing, you drop over the top? Or is that impractical?
I don't think it's practical. They need to be gasket. I could look into it. You can engineer anything. If you throw enough money at it, you could engineer anything.
Well, didn't you mention $5,000 per raise?
Approximately,
Yeah.
between material and labor.
So $500,000 to $750,000 for something that's going to be an eyesore and receive a lot of public pushback.
No, 55,000 at worst.
Oh,
5,000 times 11.
Sorry.
But again, it's no more of an eyesore than our existing transformers out there. And
Put a new one.
we could paint them.
Yeah, I was just going to suggest that,
Vegetation also.
because they're kind of concrete sleeves, right?
Correct.
And we could paint those or get them colored or something.
Yeah. Or the other option is we could build earth around them too, so that it's just natural dirt up against them. We don't want to plant anything too close to it, because then that creates root intrusion into the collection system. If we had, I don't think we can plant anything in there that's not part of the native mix anyway. So bigger trees and plants would be prohibited anyhow.
Willows wouldn't work.
What's that?
Willows?
Oh, willows are the worst for root intrusion. Well, not the worst, but they're one of the cedars are the worst. Willows are
They see
second.
fire, yeah.
Oh yeah, those things are bad.
Okay. Never mind.
But yeah, we could build that up to at least try to reduce the visual impact. But if we don't do something, the state's not going to be happy with us, and this is basically the easiest solution
Well,
and cheapest solution since we have no money.
And given the changes that we're seeing, this could be a yearly event,
Yes,
several times a year.
agreed. The other, and I'll throw that out since we're talking about visual impact, the other option that we could do, which I set aside just simply because of cost, we could replace every manhole with basically they make these watertight manholes that are bolt-down lids. Sutter Creek uses them. Jeff would know. If you've seen the manholes in Sutter Creek that are sitting right in the middle of the creek, they actually use bolt-down lids on there and they're all sleeved. We could replace all the manholes at an exorbitant cost, probably $25,000 per manhole, but we could do that instead if we're worried about a couple mounds in the meadows.
A couple, be 18 of them.
Well, that's if you do them all.
A few
You
then,
just
3 or more.
Do the worst, the lowest.
Engineer talking.
And
Again,
couldn't
I'm
do
very
that.
conservative with our
No.
budget.
Well, yeah, it's a wetland, so.
Yeah,
there
I
might
don't know
be-
that we could
there
actually
might be
do that
red
in the
tape.
meadow.
Oh, we can. We have an easement through. I looked at it regardless of the conservation easement. We can fully maintain our facilities. People don't like it when we do that, but we have every right to do that. We would just have to do some PR and try and explain to people why it was necessary to
How
help
much
get them on
it's
board.
costing them.
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
mean, it's a trade-off.
Yeah. So there are other options out there for sure.
I think on this item, the PR is the key to success. You need to start now and put out some articles and maybe even have HOAs send out an email to all of their customers, so to speak, because this is the only way that we have the money to do anything.
Right.
So let's PR the heck out of it.
No, I agree. Absolutely.
Rick, anything else on your report? No, sir. Okay, well, thank you. We'll move on to item 11, standing committee reports. Planning committee, Eric?
Met twice since we board last met, but I think most of the things been mentioned. I think I'll just mention one or two, and one is the Vail has a goal to reach, is it a carbon-free footprint or something like that, by 2030. And at one planning committee meeting that was brought up to us is, do we have anything that we can do to help them along? Bob has some good ideas. We got referred to two people in Heavenly, I think, Vail people, who deal with this kind of thing. As of now, I don't know how serious they are about really engaging us, and we don't want to do much without them being serious about it. But Bob has some good ideas and is willing to talk to them.
Brandy, I don't know if you have any update, because you did talk with Brian Bigley.
I did. I spoke with him and a couple people from Vail that are working on this project. Just to explain, they were very interested to understand our electric rate structure, how much is power purchase, how much is debt service. And they're working on some potential projects in California and throughout the country with renewable energy projects, solar farms, wind farms, that sort of thing. So I gave them some information. They plan to get back to us, but it was a nice conversation with them.
But they didn't ask us to do anything other than give them that
No, and I did. I explained the thought of heat pumps, special electric rate, and they're definitely concerned about the electric rate right now. So they said they would think about that and try to see if that was reasonable.
Okay. And then the other thing is, let me just, well, you mentioned the employee housing loop road. They're on, two other things that are pending when there's staff time. One is the idea of should we be offering on a contract basis the clearing out of storm drains during the winter, of the snow, so they can drain better on these kinds of events. And the other is the possibility of placing some remote cameras on the Out Valley towers so that we can monitor remotely to see if something's out, if it's a problem with the overhead line. But those are lower priority items at this point, I guess. Although, like I said, I don't know what the TriTac thing is about storm drains. That's it.
Bob?
A couple items. One is Department of Homeland Security's put out a report looking at the last 2 years of intrusions into utility systems. And so they described how it was done and how you prevent against it. So we reviewed that report to identify whether there's anything within that we could learn to make sure we're adequately protected. Our main protection is that the powerhouse is not on a network. So you have to physically go into it in order to do anything. We also agreed to pick up the biannual survey of customers, so we'll review a draft and circulate for the rest of the board. It will make it as similar as the last one, so we have ways of comparison. And then I don't think we've mentioned the website, the ADA requirements by public agencies for websites. So for visually impaired, et cetera, there's some best practices for how to do that. So we are currently not in compliance, and so we're looking at sort of taking a fixed amount each year and focusing on things that would have the best benefit to customers, whether they had a visual or audio impairment or not. And so we'll be tracking that. The other new project is we generally tried to gradually eliminate all paper processes within the district. So last year we worked on eliminating for routine maintenance of valves, et cetera, of having all of that be online and on the iPad. We've pretty much finished the project to map on Google Maps every single thing, every single item of interest in all of the utilities, and that helped us identify the list of where we don't, for example, have a propane shutoff at the curb. So that project has been completed. So the new one that we've started up for this year is if you have a backflow valve, you're required to test it annually between April 1st and October 15th, and that was a totally manual process. So that's now been automated, so we can make it easier to do that. And that's what's new.
Good, thank you. Peter, operations?
We didn't meet this month.
Standish Finance Committee?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there are only two things I can think of that we've talked about there that we haven't covered here. One is, what's it called, Eric? It's the Caltrans out of area service.
Out of service, yeah, out of service rate structure.
And staff has a interesting proposal that we ended up agreeing with, and I think that'll be an agenda item for the May board meeting.
That's correct.
Right.
Yes, it will be on May.
And then the second thing that has come up since then is Vale's expressed an interest in having somebody to call Paul, Pfotenhauer,
Fottenhauer, I believe.
who's their resort finance director. He looks like a controller to me. Joined the finance committee, and I think our consensus, this came up since our meeting, Nancy, which is why you don't know about it, is that, yeah, we'd welcome the input and participation. So maybe that'll be our consent item at the next board meeting, if the president and general manager think that's appropriate.
Just so you know, I have had some contact with Paul. Frank Dixon, who was the financial person at Vail, has left. He was with the resort for years, and years. He's no longer with the resort anymore, and Paul is now in his place. So I have had some contact with him regarding billing statements and things like that. So.
Thank you, Sanders. Personnel Committee met on March 29th, and we had a discussion and decision on General Manager Continuing Education, and Eric will be pursuing that and making those arrangements. May 18th, the staff is holding a team building, which will be off-site. The board members are invited. I was hoping to attend, but now I can't. So any other board members that are interested, you might contact Kim or Jessica, let them know. And then the other thing we discussed was the update of the employee handbook, which is in progress, and we'll receive further information on that later. So that was pretty much our personnel meeting.
I could just ask that.
Yeah.
Staff would really like to see as many board members there as we could. We talked about it in the employee appreciation lunch we had this week, and there was a fervent hope that you guys could be there if you could. So if you can't make it, understood, but anything you could do to try and make it, I think staff would appreciate it, and I think it'd be important for them to see you there.
What day is it?
May 18th. It's a Friday in Tahoe.
Okay, moving on to number 12, temporary advisory committee reports, and we have a fire services funding subcommittee.
We've met a couple times. I've mentioned this before, but essentially the approach has been to start with what would be the easiest implementation from our perspective, and that is, since we're trying to get revenues from day users and people out on the highway and so on, was there a way for Vail to simply, through an agreement with us, attach a fee of some sort to their tickets? And the answer to that is basically no. But we've been waiting for some promised thoughts from Doug through conversations with his colleagues in Colorado. And to my knowledge, we have not gotten that at this point. I don't know.
All I did receive a call from him on Friday, which I think I referenced in that one email. He did call and say they hadn't forgot about us. They were working on it. He had some questions, which I answered, and he was hoping to have something to us today, but hopefully soon.
And then we've looked into and discussed a whole number of other options, like access to sales tax revenues, for example, and so on. Some of this needs our next steps. So our next steps at this point are, as I've said, we've recommended not including any increases in revenues for this coming fiscal year, but push it out. So we've got time to explore these other alternatives. So before we hit a special tax idea or the assessment idea, we want to explore these other things. So to that end, we want to have a conversation with Dick Shanahan with some detailed questions about possibilities. And I've mentioned to Terry that we want to start a conversation again with the counties. So Eric and I will coordinate a conversation with Terry and with Lynn just as a starting point, and we'll see where we go from there. So the combination of what we can legally do beyond the special tax, what we might get through discussions with the counties and with Vail. So over the next month or two, that's what we'll be doing. And then if nothing pans out there, we'll have to go the special tax route.
And since Supervisor Woodruff's here, a quick question. Do you know, the way it was adopted in the Alpine County ordinances, that up to 10% of the TOT can be allocated to KMPUD. Do you know if that's being done? We are receiving 10% or receiving?
Yeah.
It is 10?
I don't know what the percentage is. I know that we get a check for TOT.
Yeah. Is the county auditor retiring? Is that true soon?
Carol's still there, right?
Well,
I just would like to sit down with the auditor so I could understand. Oh, she's not retiring?
And I wouldn't call her the auditor, it's our CAO.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it possible?
You should probably talk to her soon, yes.
Talk to her soon. Thank you.
No, so again, I think that I'm hoping that by the June meeting, we've got some conclusions around possibilities. That's what I would like to do, and then we can decide what the next steps are. I will not be here at the May meeting, so if there's a discussion that we have before then Eric and maybe John Rader can update you.
Thank you. Which reminds me, is everyone else going to be here for the May meeting?
No, I'll be in Europe.
You'll be in Europe, so it's...
Do you have a quorum?
What's the date? What's the date of the meeting?
The
It's
12th of May.
I should be here.
I'll plan to be here.
You will be here. Please.
I won't be here for June or August.
Okay.
I will see. I'll be in Mexico with my family, but I'll see if there's a possibility to call in. At this point, I don't know where I'd even be on May 12th. So, how far in advance do you need to be able to send out a notice?
Just
It has to go out with the agenda.
72 hours, is it?
So 72 hours, and we can do a teleconference notice at a hotel room, wherever you are.
Right. No, I've posted it in Singapore. Got a lot of interest.
Nobody
there.
came and knocked on the door. No, we can't meet with three. Three is a quorum, so it is possible.
Very good. Item number 13, general discussion. Board members?
I have two questions. Brandy, when you said the electric outage, we weren't able to, or Rick said it, close the circuit in KM Green. Should we be able to close the circuit? Why weren't we able to? And can we going forward?
Not without additional programming. We would like to be able to, and it was something that we had tried to get Exponential to program for us. We can close one of the two breakers remotely, the other one we cannot at this point.
We did budget for programming in capital. We did put that in.
But is that a one or a two? Is that something we're going to do, or we're on the list of things that we'd like to do?
I believe it was a 1, if I'm not mistaken.
My second comment is, and Nancy brought it up, is could we apply some pressure to get the roads fixed this year?
Yeah, and
early, because Gary Dirk is in charge of, or Kirkwood, what do they call themselves?
KBD.
Yeah. I think they control Kirkwood Meadows Drive through the KCA, right? They're responsible for
KCA
maintaining.
controls a portion of Kirkwood Meadows Drive. Loop Road is Vale, and we do have a hammer. We just didn't execute. We didn't go nuclear. We do have a nuclear option. We just didn't.
Yeah, could we apply some pressure early?
Basically, here's what we can do. Under our contract, we could have the repairs done and send a bill to Vale. Now, how much that would destroy the relationship, how much animosity that would cause, I don't know. The classic I keep getting is, well, we're looking at a whole thing. We're looking at drainage, which is true. Speaking with RCI, they did look at rerouting drainage. They looked at rerouting it through our property, which I have a problem with, which I'll deal with on a separate issue, but they did look at doing drainage to fix what's causing the problems, as well as paving, but yeah, I will start hammering it once we're really done with the storms. I intend to start hammering Doug again, going, look, my board's done. We will go, if we have to repair this, we will do it, and we'll send you the bill. But I really would not like to get there from the get. I'd like to work cooperatively with them to reach a mutually agreeable solution. Last year's solution was coal patch. Camped in by foot, if I'm not mistaken. Some guy jumped up and down, not even equipment, so, yeah, shovel.
I guess what I would suggest is that to communicate to Doug that the consensus of the board was that we'd like a sensible proposal from you in the next 30 to 45 days, or our board is potentially going to go down the avenue of repairing it and sending you the bill.
Okay.
I don't know, is that something you guys think is?
I would add a little more heat to that. I would say that, and I would encourage us to see, can we get a bid on getting it fixed?
No, sure.
So then we know the amount that we're going to charge them, unless they have a better idea.
And so that's Loop Road.
Yeah. For
How
Loop
about
Road.
Kirkwood Meadows Drive?
That's not.
Do we have any leverage with the KCA?
No. I could shut off their water. But no.
Well, we have Jack Longanati, who's the president of it.
I don't think so.
Bruce.
Not on the board anymore.
Bruce
Yeah.
is
Bruce.
president, I
It's Bruce.
think. But no, we have no leverage on Kirkwood Meadow Drive.
Okay, well, I would encourage you to get some leverage. And by the way,
I will
Bruce
call
is-
my cousin Guido, and
Bruce is a reasonable person.
Yeah, I'm sure we can.
And I know
they have a proposal to fix.
Yeah, I know they did
The
a
Meadows.
survey, road repair survey last year.
Right, and it was so expensive that they aren't releasing it to KCA members. Not sure how that works, but it's there for anyone who wants to go look at it at the clubhouse. I went and looked at it myself there because as an engineer, I'm curious. I want to see it, and it's not cheap. So if any of you are KCA members, it is available there to go review. But I will. I'll reach out to Bruce and see what their plan is for the year. My guess, I think it's an educated guess, is that they are going to simply do patch paving as they did this summer for the unraveling areas that are pretty darn bad. And I know KMA has some paving to do down by Hoffman's, whatever street he lives on.
So that's
Yarrow, thank you.
I was gonna ask about that. So I live on Yarrow,
Oh,
so
okay.
I driven down there. And it looks like that the, whatever you wanna call it, that's collapsing, has something to do that runs right into like one of your gas meters. And, or not meters, gas, whatever you call them, tops. And then there's another one that goes across this way that appears that it has something to do with water. So we're trying to figure, I'm
Yeah,
trying to figure
I
out how
looked
does
at
that
it.
work?
I actually went over and walked over and looked at it, and Rick and I went over and looked at it as well. There's a lot of stormwater running off that isn't being managed coming down onto that right there. If you wait for a rain event and go look, and you'll get a pretty good idea of what I'm talking about. That's causing those issues. The district, as I understand, hasn't done anything in that road in 8 years. The only thing we did was 2 years ago, and it was all off pavement. So, yeah, I don't know if it's a trench line failing or if it's around or next to the trench line failing. I just don't know and why it is. But 8 years it's been a while. So we went back and looked at the old work orders on that.
So I don't think I understand then what does our road person get together with the district to say, okay, what's the solution here? No sense in us investing however many thousands, and it's gonna fail
I just
again.
would simply repave that. From my taking off my KMPUD hat, putting on my engineer hat, just as a civil engineer that's done this, I would discourage KMA from doing that because you're throwing good money after bad, and you're just going to have to redo it again. And I would recommend you get someone to actually look at the proper fix for that and implement that instead of just a patch pave, because it'll save you money in the long run. And if you do end up hiring an engineer, I'm happy to go out there and meet with him and talk with him, and just give me enough time to let me know, and I'm happy to go help you guys however I can.
Because a former board member, Keith Myers, he was a civil engineer. He moved out of that area, so I know that he put his professional eyeballs on it.
Yeah.
And that whole road was redone not that long ago. I mean, we dug it all up.
Yeah.
So, okay.
I think the stormwater's still coming in, and you also have Howard at your disposal too, so between Howard and I, and if you hire someone else, I think you get it, and we're happy to help. I'm happy to help. And I don't mean to volunteer Howard, I shouldn't say that, but I'm sure he'd be happy to help.
What's on his front yard?
Okay, thank you.
East Meadows, after, not this past winter, but the other winter, the last winter, we did quite a bit of drainage work, and I can't remember who the engineer is, but John Weehan knows.
Oh, okay.
And if you need recommendations, I can tell you some good engineers around here that are pretty darn good and pretty darn cheap, not like some of the bigger firms. They're a little more like a 1 and 2, 3-man shops that do this regularly. So if you need anything, just give me a call or shoot me an email. I'm happy to help on that.
Good. Any other items from board members? Any questions?
I just have one more quick thing.
Okay.
Digging through old board minutes and looking at all sorts of old things, the board's current adopted ordinance is that the board meets on Thursdays. You've never officially changed it to Saturday, so this is totally not kosher. So maybe we should consider in May adopting that.
I think that would be a good idea.
And I've heard from some community members and staff as well that a consideration of moving it to a late Friday, so as people are coming up the mountain getting here, so it doesn't impact ski days. People might be interested in this board considering moving it to Friday. So I don't know what the consensus of the board is, but just something to consider for discussion in May. Of course, there'll only be 3 of you here, so if you two really like a Saturday one, you may want to speak now or forever hold your peace.
I think late Friday would be, well, what do you mean by late Friday?
Probably Friday afternoon.
2 o'clock or something.
Yeah, 2 or 3 o'clock. Give everybody time to get out of this. I mean, everybody that lives in the Bay gets out of the city by no later than 2 or no later than 1 these days, I imagine. Berkeley's not quite as bad, I guess.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm up here on my own personal thing is I'm up here generally on Thursdays for a board meeting weekends, so it wouldn't matter if it was late enough.
We'd have to change the ordinance.
Yeah, that was an interesting, meetings on Thursday starting at 6 o'clock. But, yeah, no, I mean, I don't, for the 3 of you, I don't, just not, don't start it at 1 o'clock on Friday or in the middle.
If we actually did want to find out, since we're about to do a customer survey, we could ask attendance and with
That's a
people are
great
more
idea.
likely to attend
Just
and do
capture
3
that.
different times.
That's a great idea.
That way we don't have to guess.
And maybe raise it at the July meeting when more people show up.
Oh, July 1st, that's another good point. So.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
The other thing that had been nice is TriTac eventually moved their meeting to coincide with what your meeting
Right,
was.
which is
So
the-
that was really, really helpful.
And it is going to stay that way. It's just this one got moved because of poor Brendan's issues.
Yeah.
But that would actually, they would be morning and then would roll right into ours. That's another good point. So maybe draft that up somehow on the customer survey. And I anticipate we'll get the draft out to the board for review probably end of next week. Yeah, so that way you guys can look at it before we take it back and come back through IT.
I guess all things being equal, I would probably prefer Friday afternoon. We had Thursday evenings, and then when Michael became general manager, he suggested moving it to Saturday mornings for attracting more community participants.
Well, since we have Judy and Nancy,
Representing
these
the entire
are the
community.
community participants. Let's be honest. We are glad, and then John, when we see him sometimes, what is your sense of your schedule and the rest of your KMA members, for example? What would be their preference?
I think we like the way it is because we can then piggyback on your 8 a.m. meeting and have our KMA meeting in the afternoon. So our people have the option of being here for the meeting. And we don't start till 3 o'clock, so you can go ski your brains out.
That takes more than 3 hours.
So as you begin to explore whether you're going to move it or you're not going to move it, I think it's great that the district, televises, but I find it limiting that you can't call in. And you did at one time when there was a hearing, and it became whoever was chair at the time to have to manage the people that called in. But I didn't think it was that unwieldy, so to speak. So as you begin to think about this more, can you provide that opportunity for people to call in? We have found in KMA that by providing people the opportunity to call in, that you do get a bit more participation. And I understand.
Calling on a conference call, is it a conference call number?
Yeah. And you take attendance, to find out who's there. And as I understand it, Amador County now provides that for their Board of Supervisors meetings. It's not just attend online, you attend over the phone, so I thought that was very fascinating.
It's another thing for Bob's IT committee to consider.
Well, very good. We'll recess, go into closed session, and thank everyone for being here.